Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome. There we go. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our June 12th, 2023 strategic planning meeting. It is 9 a.m. and let the record reflect that all 5 commissioners are present and our executive management team. And we're going to start off with, it says Gavin Cooley, but it's Teresa Sanders.
It's actually Teresa Sanders and Gavin Cooley. He just happens to be invisible at the moment, so he should be walking in at any moment. Thank you for having us. We're actually here at the invitation of Commissioner Walter, who's been participating in our work group, and I want to make sure that we cover what she's specifically interested in today, because we've had some great conversations. But we are a couple of weeks away from the June 28th report out of our set of recommendations regarding Regional Homeless Authority. And I have to tell you, since our last update, we've continued to have an awful lot of community feedback from citizens, from law enforcement, from service providers, and it won't surprise you to know that the feedback has been rich and varied. Individuals have very specific points of view on how things we should think about as we work to address this challenge for our community. And I think what that has highlighted for me throughout is that there is no one simple solution to resolving this challenge that we all face. And so we have put together a group of guiding principles for us to really guide how our thinking around the recommendations. And one of those principles, actually many of them, really address the fact that there is no one set of solutions that gets us to an outcome. In other words, we can't simply build our way out of this. It's not just a service challenge. It's not just a jail challenge. It's not just a crime challenge. It's all of these things. And the model that we're proposing, no surprises, is really a people-first model, understanding and triaging and addressing the specific issues that an individual has in the system so that we can get to an outcome. Some of the challenges that we face as we're putting the components together, and just as a reminder, the 4 things that we talked about delivering in our recommendations on the 28th include an interlocal agreement that defines the regional authority that we recommend. And in that interlocal, we also defined the funding sources. And if you'll recall, last time we spoke, and as we've been working with our work group, at this point, we're talking about a very specific group of public dollars, largely state, federal, or locally allocated dollars that is specifically allocated for housing and human services, that we would bring those dollars together under central leadership, and including the overhead that's associated with those funds, meaning the people that manage those programs. I believe Rick mentioned last time we were here that as we've looked at the complexity of the system, we see an opportunity with the integration to simply get more invested in the community by simplifying what we're doing. It was interesting timing. The 3 of Rick and Gavin and I were at the city council last week, and just prior to our presentation, an update of the Regional Homeless Authority progress, the City of Spokane Community Housing and Human Services folks presented their budgetary data. And it was so clear just from the presentation that the fractured and siloed approach to how we make these investments is really a key component to why we're struggling. It was kind of interesting to watch as I was watching it, and even as much time as we've spent looking at the dollars, it was really difficult to tell for anybody outside of really keen understanding of this system which dollars are used for which purposes and what outcomes are being achieved. And since I used the word outcomes, I would say it continues to be the greatest challenge in this review of getting available data to really be able to tell the community where we are today, where all the dollars went, and what outcomes we've achieved. That's obviously a key component going forward of what you would expect to be at the top of the list. There's my friend Gavin. He's not invisible anymore. But we continue to struggle with finding the data components to explain to the community and to the service providers and to ourselves what has been achieved for the dollars invested. What we do know, and Gavin might want to talk a little bit about this, is at a 30,000 foot level, the data certainly represents that the expenditures have gone up significantly and the challenge has also gotten significantly worse. So these are two things that tell us that even though more dollars are invested, our outcomes aren't achieving what we want them to achieve. And we continue, this is the presentation I referred to from the city with the various funding sources that perfectly demonstrated part of the challenge. So as we're coming down to the final weeks here, we've identified the funding sources, the overhead attached to those funding sources, and we've had really good discussions around the governance model. That was the fourth of the four things that we've agreed to deliver in this effort. And I would be interested actually if the commissioners would talk a little bit about the governance model and just thoughts about it. The important thing about it, just to highlight, is that while we have a mix of elected officials and I'll say community experts as a recommendation for the mix on the board, so not one or the other, but both, which is also kind of the model of everything we're doing, both and all of the above. We have outweighted non-electeds to the board, and I'm curious to hear from Amber and Josh, just like what you heard from the work group, what your thoughts are on that approach, because as we all know, it does come down to governance a lot of the time.
So like the latest proposal that we've been talking about it's been moving a little bit each time.
I think we're at 5 and 7.
Okay,
5 and 7 or 5 and 8.
and maybe 8 if we talk about the COC board.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think we've excluded, so just to back up a little bit further, one of the things that was important, well, a number of things, as we thought about governance, it's critically important. We're talking about public money. We must have public officials, elected officials on the board. We also wanted subject matter experts in the community, but none that could benefit or influence funding to a particular set of services. And so there was a conversation about the COC, and I have a very strong opinion that a COC representative isn't appropriate for the board, but that is part of the debate and the discussion.
So right now, the current draft has 5 elected officials, counting,
I think it was 6.
or we talked about adding a 6 to make it an odd number.
A second
I don't-
small
A
cities.
second small cities, yeah.
So potentially 2 small cities, county, representative of the council of the city of Spokane, mayor, and then city of the valley. So that'd be 6, potentially 6 elected leaders, and then 7 multi-sector community members, business, workforce development,
Public
social
safety,
safety,
medical,
housing.
behavioral health,
Yeah.
housing.
behavioral health,
Yeah.
housing, but none of those individuals would have an interest in, like, they wouldn't be working for, like, one of the beneficiaries.
Exactly.
Right.
We would want to make sure that there was separation from any access to funding.
But like we talked about, a PDA board is really responsible for making sure the funding goes out, that the strategies and the outcomes are being met. But the key to the, I guess, strategic work is this advisory board that would be made up of folks who, and we have someone with lived experience.
We did
On-
add someone with
on the
lived
PDA
experience,
board.
which was a great add.
But the advisory board, as imagined, would really kind of be like the current COC board, and maybe this current COC board becomes the advisory board and additional people are added. I don't know how that would work, but that board is made up of people with specific, expertise in supporting folks with mental health, substance use disorder, homelessness, housing development, So that advisory board can advise the PDA board in terms of strategic allocation of funds. That's kind of the framework, because I think we kind of got, like I said a couple weeks ago, when we did a report out, folks were like, well, we gotta have this person with expertise in the PDA board, and this person, but it's like, well, no, the PDA board doesn't need to have all the expertise. They need to be folks that can be led by a CEO, that the CEO and the board are working
Exactly.
together to make sure the funding is maximized and that the outcomes and the data are being tracked, and, you know, to show that the high line, I guess, of the work. And the advisory board is really giving expertise on best practices, you know, types of housing that needs to be developed, like things like that. Is that fair?
Yeah, it is, and I think one of the many things that's siloed in this conversation is advisory boards. There's many, and the COC board has specific responsibility, and housing and human services boards of various kind have others. That, to me, operationally, if you're on a board or a CEO, you want to have an advisory group. And so that's something that evolves over time, and decisions that a board would make about what is the appropriate advisory group. I think one of the critical pieces is, of those subject matter expertise that are considered for board appointment, that they are actually responsible for rolling up sleeves and doing work. So I would anticipate that a housing appointment to this regional organization would be responsible for collaborating amongst many housing providers to build strategic solutions for how we deliver what types of housing for not only homeless, but what's the connection to our vulnerably housed population, our workforce housing, and all those kinds of things. So even going so far as to work with planning groups and elected officials to figure out, where does this mix of housing fit in the overall mix for the region. So we would anticipate that these subject matter experts would be carrying a pretty significant workload for the board.
And then, do you think, have you updated the principles that we talked about on Thursday?
Yeah, we've added,
Made some edits to those?
made some edits.
Is that something you could email out to the,
Yeah, well, have everybody
Board.
seen the 8 principles?
well,
They have not.
No, not, because we did editing on Thursday afternoon, so
Yeah.
We'll send out
I
the
haven't
most
seen
recent
the
draft.
newest.
Can we, Gavin, why don't you go ahead and just go through them really quickly, because I think there was a conversation as we were talking to some community members about why weren't the guiding principles set up front? And the reason the guiding principles weren't set up front is because of the period of time that we've spent examining the challenge that we have. Now that we understand the complexity of what's happening on our street and how that's changed pretty dramatically over especially the last 5 years, I think these guiding principles are really for us to help develop what the set of recommendations are. And they will, it's our hope that we'll get them to a place where they are acceptable in the ILA itself, because we think that they are key to what we're trying to achieve for the community. So there's only 8 of them at this point, and we're talking about tweaking some additional things, but
And they'll evolve over time too. I mean, part of the context for this is, where are we right now as a community, the acuity of the homelessness situation in Spokane. Just in terms of that context, before I go through these guiding principles, Spokane County right now has 438 homeless per 10,000. And we often compare ourselves to other jurisdictions. So Tacoma we always go to Tacoma and we go to Boise, really naturally. So if you go to Tacoma, very similar in terms of population, housing, median house costs, et cetera, they're 47% lower. So if we have 438 per 10,000, they have 232. If you go to Boise, and Boise has, it's not to say that homelessness isn't a housing problem. It is in many respects, but Boise's cost per home, the median cost per home, is about 100,000 higher than Spokane. And they have 134 homeless per 10,000. So they're 69% lower than we are. And then the one that we really talked about the most, because it's just about the collaboration and coming together and integrating, because we've done a lot of that in this community and seen the benefits of doing that. So the comparative there isn't in terms of population or other aspects of the community, but simply that they focused on bringing together a regional collaborative system, and that's Houston. So Houston, with their 4 million people, fourth largest metropolitan area, almost 5 million actually, but fourth largest metropolitan area in America, they're at 52 per 10,000. That's 88% lower than Spokane. And their numbers continue to go down. We went up 35% in the most recent point in time count. So it just gives you a sense. And then even, a much maligned, throughout California, we know California has about 53% of the total homelessness population in the country. So you can go to someplace down in California and say, well, yeah, those guys are really not doing the right thing. We don't want to emulate them in any way. And that's kind of the story. But if you go to San Diego, they have 275 per 10,000, really attractive climate, et cetera, 37% lower than Spokane. We're in the top 10 now in the nation, possibly even higher than that, but it's hard to tell with the HUD is slow pulling together their statistics. So I only bring all that up because it kind of sets the tone for the acuity that we're in. So a lot of this, there is conversation about adding principles about the pipeline, getting into the pipeline leading in, but we're clearly in Spokane in a triage moment, addressing a really, really difficult situation, and the principles reflect that somewhat. And as Teresa says, they'll evolve over time. But the first one is our region cares for those in need, and our service providers are doing incredible work. And that recognizes we have the network. It looks like we have more housing units and are spending more dollars per homeless person than Houston. So it gets back to that integration component, and we have this incredible provider network. But it's really clear after meeting literally with dozens of them that nobody's talking to anybody else, and we even have a process for bidding and everything else that pits them one against the other rather than brings them together to collaborate in any way. Our region wants and deserves a clean and safe community, and this gets back to the compassion fatigue. We know this is a really difficult issue on a humanitarian level, but there's also a compassion fatigue that the city, the region wants a clean and safe community. Individuals can be helped out of homelessness with appropriate services, work, and an expectation to succeed. And so we're going to play with those words because it is about services and work and housing. And those are all critical, but also just this expectation. And many of these principles are evolving out of places like California and New York, some of the more progressive communities coming up with this kind of language.
So just to touch on that one was interesting as we were talking with the work group because what they really want to talk about is accountability. We have to start talking about accountability. So we're working on language there.
Well, these are all the unedited ones,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
And we'll get that edited list and get everybody's comments
everybody
back.
out there.
It's amazing how even one session there were a lot of improvements.
Yes.
Yeah, amazing. Number 4, our region cannot only build our way out of our homelessness crisis. Services and housing are the path to success. So we know we have housing first as a requirement of HUD. And it's a proven model, but even when you go to Houston, which is 100% housing first, they emphasize that there's always the appropriate level of services. And so there's kind of a mantra out there around housing first. If it doesn't work, and the idea that people are dropped into housing without services, we recognize it's a both and proposition.
Which is what's happening in Spokane.
Yeah, yes. Number 5, treatment is often a priority, but detention remains a necessary tool. And so this comes back to what we're seeing out of California and New York. It's a really touchy issue. Involuntary detainments are Oregon, California, and New York have all been playing with this. And how does that work? And it's a limited tool, obviously, in terms of capacity and its use, but it does remain a tool, and so we'll have to factor that in to how we proceed. Number 6, emergency shelter is not housing, but is a connection point to services. And so going back to Houston, they try to limit it to a maximum of 30 days. So if you have a couple of loose ends to tie up on the service end, you're not going to drop them into an apartment and walk away before that's been completed. But again, it's about getting people connected to the services they need and the housing. Number 7, integration of dollars, services, people, and data. are critical to successfully affordably managing homelessness. And we've talked, of course, a lot about integration and the power of that. And we've talked about data. Data is absolutely critical. We do an annual point in time count. There's many jurisdictions that know on any given week what that point in time count looks like. They do the annual because it's required, but they can constantly know. And then I think outcomes is something that we absolutely know we have to measure going forward. Spokane, or the Seattle Regional Consortium, has really run into a lot of trouble. They weren't measuring outcomes, they weren't doing admin right, they weren't doing some recipient monitoring correctly. Those things that nobody really wants to talk about that, if you spend any time in the accounting world or other tedious places like that, you realize how darn important they are. So we'll make sure we get that right. And finally, number 8, and again, we have a couple more that we've added. To find a lasting solution, we need to move city and county homelessness services to a non-political public entity that has a single purpose of regionally and collaboratively addressing homelessness. We've already played with that term political because that's a funny term. We're trying to move subject matter expertise to the front, but we're not discounting the importance of the political process and everything we're doing. So I think we have rewording that you'll see in the draft of the 10 principles.
And so these guiding principles lead us to the set of recommendations that we're currently drafting around the key areas that you saw us talk about in the early going, which is housing, health, and safety, and how far the integration goes. I think I'm actually feeling really grateful for having an opportunity to participate in this. I make a terrible volunteer, and these guys asking me to come and help has been so eye-opening to me because I see such an opportunity for our community to do something differently here, to really be the showcase for how these challenges get solved. But it's actually even bigger than that, because everywhere we look at the integration of housing, safety, and health, we see opportunities on this board, they would have an opportunity to look at, okay, how do we really solve decades challenge of mental health in our communities? What can we do? Where's the integration point? How do we actually get after addiction and treatment in a way that is big enough to get outcomes for the community? What is the connection to the detention component? Where are those services? And I know this is a conversation as the county is talking about jail. Where are the points of integration? And it just gets bigger and bigger the more we look at it. And again, it's so revealing to me, the size of the opportunity. In the first go, we're resolving, we got to get our point in time count down. This is not acceptable. There's no easy way. If we knew where the magic switch was, we would have flipped it by now, but it doesn't exist. And so how are we going to solve that? Beyond that, the opportunities are just massive to look for further points of integration to make big change happen in this community. And again, do it in a way that showcases us, Spokane, as the place that can solve the big challenges that other communities can't.
We'll mention, we added one more principle, and again, I'll send them out, but it was something to the effect that we can't afford not to do this. Yeah. And what we're seeing in all the other jurisdictions that are succeeding is they're spending about $20,000 to $25,000 for housing and appropriate levels of service. And a lot of those dollars aren't even local dollars. A lot of them are coming through SSI, DSHS, and other places outside the local community. So even that $20,000 to $25,000 cost per person that is getting the adequate services and getting housing isn't our local dollars, but we do know that the local dollars going into having somebody homeless on the streets is somewhere in the neighborhood of $30,000 to $60,000 per year in Spokane. So that's just, so the principle is we can't afford not to move on this. Did we talk about the 28th?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, those invitations will be sending out. We expect a very large group of folks. As I said, the engagement in the community has been huge, but we'll get all of the technical data. It's June 28th from 8 to 10 a.m.
And the nature of the handoff at that point.
Yeah. So as I said, we'll deliver the 4 items. Our hope is that the electeds will embrace that, do what they need to do with the ILA, and come together as quickly as the public processes would allow to advance the initiative. As of the 28th, the three of us are handing off and we're done. We've had a discussion that if elected officials do want to move forward with a regional authority and that legislative action is taken, then we'd be happy to talk about how we can help stand up the organization. But on the 28th, we'll hand off to you all. Jonathan Bingle has, I'll say this tongue in cheek, he's helpfully offered to bring all of the electeds together to do a joint legislative action, which I think would be super cool for our community, because we've never seen other communities do that. So that'd be pretty amazing. And it's something we're pretty good at here. So that's what happens on the 28th. No surprises. There's not a magic wand, as I said, or a magic switch that we can flip, but we see pretty significant opportunity with the kind of recommendations that we're going to offer.
Could I ask so the two, and maybe these things don't need to be resolved, before you sign an interlocal, but they're kind of key. So one, the city has that COC, they have the COC, I think it's 20% of the city funds? Or
About that.
About 5 to 6 million,
is tied to the continuum of care HUD designation. So my first question is, has there been conversations specifically with the city about can that designation be transferred to the new PDA or how that might work? And number two, the staff that we have here at the county and the staff at the city that are, doing a lot of the administrating of grants currently, have there been any conversations, about how we might lend those staff to this new entity?
So
Those are, I think, I see them as things that can come later, but
Okay.
they're also kind of tied to whether people feel like that they can trust that this is going to be a good landing spot.
absolutely.
I've been meeting probably a dozen meetings with the COC at least, and probably another couple dozen meetings informally with the COC chairs. They have co-chairs, Robert Lippman and Ariel Anderson. But they have a breakout group. We just met last week. And I think there was a lot of reluctance early, and it's really shifted in the last month or so and really kind of becoming a collaborative conversation. And their place right now is they're drafting what would a perfect collaborative applicant look like to them. And what's really clear is the relationship with the city of Spokane does not represent that perfect relationship. There's been a lot of drop balls, a lot of dissatisfaction. And so I think they kind of shifted from trying to protect the current way of doing things to saying, wow, if we had an organization that was the collaborative applicant we would hope for those approximately $5 to $6 million recurring dollars, what would that look like? And they're drafting that. I think they're really leaning in at this point, subject to those considerations. As far as contractual, the legal group is looking into the various options we have. A lot of it has to do with HUD requirements and working through that process, but it appears that HUD has the ability to bypass a lot of that timeline if they wanted to speed it up. So if both the COC and if this new organization was put in place, if they were both leaning in and wanting to move forward, I suspect we can move very quickly.
So, and I'll peel that back a little bit more, because City of Spokane leadership is definitely supportive of handing off the collaborative applicant to a regional authority if one is formed. And the COC is advisory. So at the end of the day, it's the collaborative applicant that has the authority to make the decision, not the COC. So and so many of like a lot of these types of collaborations that we've set up together, those decisions will be ongoing. I think like the evolution of what advisory looks like for this group will change over time. If it were me, I would want, as I said, single advisory group that also had that COC requirement component as in part of their responsibility. But that again evolves over time. And I think as I've seen advisory groups and Gavin, just have to thank him so much because he spent a lot of time working with the groups on this to make sure that we don't have barriers in the community moving forward. We have a lot of support at this point. And I think people are tend to get, tied to the status quo because they imagine that things aren't going to get better, they're just going to get a whole lot worse. And I think people are starting to see things could get a whole lot better here, and their advisory efforts could actually drive a strategic plan. So I see that moving in a really positive direction. Regarding the staff,
You don't think that has to be part of the interlocal?
I don't think we could define it at this point. I think Teresa, it needs to evolve.
I don't think I don't think we'd be ready to, because again, I think you need to stand up the board and have an awful lot of conversation about what's really needed as you develop a strategic plan. What does advisory look like? But again, everybody's ready to work for the right collaborative applicant. And if the regional authority decides that's them, the city of Spokane is certainly more than willing to hand off that collaborative applicant.
As a practical matter, there's probably only 3 organizations in Spokane that could do it. When Mandy Chapman Semple was up here that set up the Houston model and is consulting for a lot of cities, it's going to be the city or the county or possibly the housing authority. Those are the only ones that have the horsepower to be a CA for the COC.
And all of those
we met
people
with the
prefer
housing
it not
authority.
be them.
Yeah, zero interest. So if
Yeah.
the city and county come together to move forward on this, there would really be no option. It's just a question of those mechanics.
With regard to staff and the overhead, the recommendation is that 100% of the funding from the sources that we're identifying, state and federal, for housing and very specific human services funds, and very specifically not other, which you'll see in the recommendation, that the overhead, including the individuals, would go under the leadership of that authority. How that happens, again, would be up to the board to make a determination. I think Commissioner French, you have the best experience working with regional emergency communications on how that works. And the answer is that not everybody is in the boat when the boat pushes off necessarily, but we work folks in. The thing that we don't want to do is we want to make sure that nobody is concerned about employment status being harmed in terms of what pension they belong to, how that works. And so those are detailed things that'll need to be worked out, but it's critically important that the resources that manage the grants and the oversight of the grants are under that central leadership, and that again will evolve over time.
The grandfather, maybe Commissioner French, you remember like when we did the PFD and we migrated people over there. Yeah.
Moving slowly.
Go ahead, Commissioner French.
So a couple observations. When I was just in Boise here 2 weeks ago, and the one dynamic that I did notice when you look at their metrics is that see a noticeable shift of homeless from Ada County and to Canyon County, which is Caldwell, Nampa, and stuff. So it's, I wonder if some of their success is not that they've solved homelessness, they've just moved homelessness into the adjacent county. So
Yeah.
I don't know I haven't taken the time to dive into the metrics of that. Canyon County is right next to Boise County, and that's the next metropolitan area, with Nampa and Caldwell being 2 small Spokane Valley cities, 100,000 plus cities.
If I don't see it in
What's
Canyon, if I don't see it in Canyon, where would you look next just to make sure we're not doing?
Canyon would be the
That would be-
next, otherwise you're into Oregon
Okay,
and stuff, so it's really Canyon and
I'll check that.
next Canyon.
Send you some.
And then the last 60 days have been in Washington DC, and then just last week into Denver. The one thing that I notice is that you don't have any visible evidence of homelessness. You know, whether it's around the Capitol or any of that stuff, or Arlington or any of those other communities, you don't see it. And I don't know what they're doing to address it. But I'm just struck by the fact that unlike Spokane, you can't look anywhere without seeing it in that metropolitan area. And then just recently in Denver, I mean, between the Denver airport and downtown Denver, and we were staying in downtown Denver and stuff, no evidence of homelessness anywhere. And so I was just struck by what is it that they're doing? And I haven't had a chance to dig into what is it that they are doing, but I'm just struck by the fact that, you know, it's clean city, no one's sleeping in stoops or, you know, doing any of that other nefarious activities. And if a city like Denver can figure out what it is, I'm curious as to what they are doing.
Yes.
Kind of a deal. So just observations for your consideration.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, Commissioner French. I think it's I noticed the same thing when I travel, that we have a far more visible incident of homelessness, and it does appear to be a Washington, Oregon, California, that is where we're seeing it the most. I think we're seeing some changes that could have an effect there, changes in the Lake law and things like that. But this really speaks to what the other connecting points
Right,
are with the
right.
system. You know, if accountability is a key component and detention is a key component of accountability, where are those connecting points? And then how are we also connecting services there so that we get an
Right.
outcome? So I think, and we haven't had a long history of looking outside of our community for solutions. I think it's kind of a new phenomenon as we look to Houston and others. So
That's an interesting,
it's
DC
point
has
well
a,
taken.
DC has a much higher per capita than almost any city in America, so if they're
For
making it
homeless?
appear, yeah, so if they're making it appear,
Interesting.
that's
So
an
it's interesting. I wonder where they're putting them.
Yeah,
Right,
You know,
Yeah.
where is that happening? Because, we were Marine Corps barracks where we were staying here last time and stuff. You would expect, that place was, that, it was the dumps several years ago, and now it's all reinvigorated.
Huh.
But there's just no presence.
Yeah.
Just none at all.
one of the things that has struck me in all of this, just in the interests of transparency, sustainability is a huge part of this. I was mentioning to Scott this morning, seeing the article from the City of the Valley, an ARPA investment that they're making in Shelter with Family Promise. And I wonder, when I see things like that, what's our sustainability plan? How do we continue to do these things once we've spent one-time money? And one of our concerns as we're looking at this regional authority is really related to the really significant investment in shelter. And the ability, as we transition away from just continuing to build shelter to a different model, how are we going to sustain? Those are significant expenditures that just aren't sustainable in any current sources. And so you'll see us speak to it, but it's a great concern for all of us.
It looks like Canyon County has 23% lower per capita than Spokane, so not nearly as good as Boise, but significantly
Isn't
better
that
than
interesting though, that
Spokane.
they have that tells me they have shifted there, because
They have shifted.
there wasn't anything in Canyon
Commissioner
County
Kearns,
before.
and then I've got a comment, and then we're
Yep, we're
on
over.
time,
Yep.
so we'll get moving here.
So you've touched on a bunch of other communities, and I don't think in our regional collaborative meetings, we haven't really dove too deep into what other communities have done outside of Houston, but like when you touched on, you just talked about Canyon County, you've talked about Tacoma, how Tacoma has, per 10,000, such a lower amount. What is it that, I'm very interested in what Tacoma's doing, or what is Tacoma not doing that we are? Because, I think there's two ways to look at that. Is Tacoma doing something that is getting people out of homelessness? Or is Tacoma not doing things that make homeless maybe go to Seattle or go to Everett or go to a neighboring community? Because it can be either way. Are they doing something that is getting people out of homelessness, or are they doing something that's making individuals that are experiencing homeless not want to be in
I
Tacoma?
haven't reached out. Tacoma's problematic because Seattle's is a really bad number in that region. So you have that adjacent, but I like Boise. It's more isolated and you only have a couple. And so in reaching out to them and talking to them and looking at what's online, it's all about integration and collaboration once again. It sounds a lot like the same story as Houston in terms of their approach.
I think, as we've examined, and the simple fact is there's not a lot of data available. It's like everybody's got various programs and most of them are really fragmented. And some of it is, some of it is state by state policy. Certainly has been an effect in Washington. But the fact of the matter is, in Spokane, when you look at the lack of throughput that we've had, so one of our principles being about having an expectation of getting people out of homelessness, our model, for whatever reason, is basically just get people under cover but then what? You know, throughout this whole process, but then what? It's like folks wanting those related to crime to be in jail, but then you have to ask the same question, but then what? So we have to get people through the system. If we keep building and have no throughput, which we currently have, and we're building congregate housing that is having, as
And
we've
we
seen,
confirmed that
really,
with Pam Parr, that heads up the
It-
housing.
we all admit it. We're not expecting people to get to the other side of homelessness. We're not investing to get them there. Instead, we're investing in building stuff that is just exacerbating. And so, again, as you can tell by that comment alone, there is no easy solution that's not gonna get better tomorrow. We've got to get our heads together and get a very different model. We need to have mixed use rehabilitation of our congregate housing buildings that can't remain what they are. So there's a whole lot of stuff that has to happen here that's a very different way to think about this.
Yeah, well, and couple things. So to that point, we have been building permanent housing, you know, that we just keep building it, but we're not seeing the throughput
Yes.
of getting them out.
Exactly.
So I don't know, I mean, because you look at all the havens that have been built over the
Yes.
last 10 years, and we've housed a lot of people.
Yes.
But they're not having, I don't know what's causing the fact that they're not getting out of that into other housing.
They're actually, I mean, I've spent quite a lot of time with our law enforcement folks to get a better feel for what's happening on the street. And this level of acuity with mental health and addiction, no surprise, law enforcement will tell you almost universally, don't take somebody that's addicted and put them in a housing unit, because that's not what's needed. So back to where's our treatment connection? What can we compel? What's the swinging door to the detention model, so that we're making sure that we're taking care of the individual and their needs, but just putting people in housing. This housing first model is a great idea. It's a true thing that you need a place to live in order to begin to stabilize person. But we've forgotten about the part that you actually need to do the work to stabilize the person, and you don't just need the roof. And so our model has been built on location, on building. We have a problem where we need to address the individual challenge, and then get them to housing. And our model focuses on housing and none of the rest of it. So we got to solve that.
And then in DC, so when I was back there with the legislative NACO meeting, there was an encampment that was being cleared.
Was that right?
Yeah, so,
Yeah, so I must have just hit it on a good week.
and then there's,
They
also have
They are
day-
transitory.
Yeah,
right, and they also have a day housing that I toured that, has like 300 people go through it a day. So, where a lot of the shelters, you're out during the day. This provided that day
Okay.
opportunity that was downtown, that, like I said, like 300 people go through, and they've got services in there, so.
Would that
So
be-
there's just some other things that they are doing.
They are
that-
doing, yeah.
that are
Would that
helping.
be similar to that entry point in Houston? Isn't it open all day where you can go in and kind of get triaged
Yes.
and enter into services?
The Beacon, yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
remarkable, and no neighbors complaining about it because it feels just like it's clean, it's safe, it's a remarkable place and all needs are met, whether it's your ID, your food.
and it's a triage center, not
It's a service.
not a shelter. It's not just a,
They don't do shelters in Houston, that's just, they don't treat it as a meaningful response to homelessness at all.
and we're finding we can't afford it.
I'm wondering too,
None of
I
our-
just Googled like Denver and I was like, and when I was down in Phoenix at the end of March for that housing homelessness conference, I got to see some of their shelters that they put together that are slightly different than the Trent shelter model. But anyway, a lot of these things are being stood up with a lot of ARPA money, and it's all gonna run
It's
out
all
at some
gonna
point. So
evaporate.
hopefully we are positioning ourselves here to think beyond. Like Denver, I just looked at, they met all of their goals of their homelessness strategies over the last, they just released like a new 7-year plan or something. But one of the reasons why they built the amount of housing that they had aimed for was a ton of ARPA funds. So whether that's sustainable,
Yeah.
DC
That's
isn't a-
concerning.
I was wrong though, but DC is about 29% lower than Spokane per capita, so that's not as bad as I thought it was.
Wow, that says something, actually. That says a lot. I mean, just looking at the data. At the end of the day, though, the data tells us that we're not getting better, and that's not acceptable. So what are we gonna do differently? And how do we do it better than everybody else?
Well, they had
That
a
to me is the
32,
goal.
they had a 32% decrease in the current year, whereas we had a 35% increase.
Came here.
Turns out.
I want to say thank you for coming today. Really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
Thank you for the invite.
We look
Yes.
forward to seeing you at the end of the month. Sorry, Scott, I thought we were gonna be quick, but it's a topic everybody cares about.
So Wednesday, the 28th, are we gonna have one more of the small
Yeah,
group
we have one
meetings?
more work group
Okay.
meeting in a couple weeks, and
It's the
then.
22nd.
And then you'll
Yes, I
send
think
out,
you're right.
and then you'll send out kind of final draft materials before the
Yeah.
28th?
We remember the no surprises rule.
Yeah,
And you're not expecting elected officials to be prepared for anything on the 28th besides sitting there
No.
and being there to support and listen?
to receive information, I will say that.
Are we getting up on stage? I'm just
You won't be up on stage.
Poor Chris had to jump up there when we were all gone in April.
Oh, no,
Never mind.
we want the elected, plus I think it's hard as an elected official to be on the panel, but I will say, I would be prepared for media, because there will be media there, so they will ask you questions.
So you're inviting a lot of the providers and the whole
Yes.
community is invited?
Yes, and
Okay.
there's a lot of interest, so I expect we'll have a pretty great group. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you, volunteers.
Volunteer.
For volunteers.
Okay, so I don't see Erin. Oh, Erin's online. Okay, so next up we have Erin to give us a fair fee briefing.
Good morning and happy Monday, everyone.
Happy Monday to you.
Yes, I am briefing you today on our proposed increases for the 2023 fair for some admission items and fair parking. And they are on your consent agenda for June 20th for approval. We have been busy at the Fair and Expo, conducting a number of comparative rate analyses on all areas of our business. And part of that is the fair and looking to where we can generate some more revenue and plan for our future and work on building up capital funding sources. So with that said, thank you, Ron, for putting Exhibit A up there. Traditionally, right now, an adult admission ticket to the fair is $13, all days, all hours. What we are proposing is that on Fridays through Sunday, so both weekends, going to $15 for adult admission tickets. Something I've done is study ticket pricing around the state at familiar comparative fairs, same size, similar demographics. And a lot of groups are going to this dynamic pricing where your higher demand hours, there is, a cost increase. But with that said, we would keep our senior, military, and child ticket prices the same on all days of the fair. And of course, 6 and under are always free to the fair. Are there any questions on this first portion?
No, I think everyone's just looking at it, so yeah.
Okay. Then we get into our pre-season ticket offerings. In the middle of the page there, you'll see adult pre-season. We are looking to increase that from $8 to $10. And then our youth and senior tickets, we're looking to make a $1 increase again for pre-season offerings. So pre-season meaning we go on sale July 10th, and the last day to buy a discount fair ticket is the day prior to opening day. So that'd be September 7th. Those discounts would end at close of business. Then we also offer a group sales ticket program for groups buying 20 or more, which is a really popular program for us. Again, at $7 per ticket, that dollar increase. And then we have a couple promotional areas with Tough Enough to Wear Pink, where we're looking to leave that the same moving forward, where $1 of each ticket purchased to that night's rodeo goes to our Tough Enough to Wear Pink nonprofit organization we partner with. And then we'll have some other promotions coming out this summer as well. So just continuing to have the ability to make those decisions for those promotions as the fair director. And then transitioning into parking. Currently, parking has been $5 per day, every day, all lots. Again, in the research I've done with other fairs, we're seeing an average cost of $10 per day at fairs around the state. Also looking at the arena, which ranges from $7 at a Chiefs game up to $25 per parking space at a concert. So we feel like we are definitely aligning with the pricing folks are experiencing as they're attending events in our community and at other fairs. So with going to $10 all days from the 5, we would keep the $5 rate for Monday, Senior Day. And again, that's a great opportunity where we have a lower attendance and, you know, folks could come out to the fair and enjoy a $5 parking day on that one day only. And then the $10 on the other days. We do spend a lot of money to manage parking at the fair with our parking contractor and also our flagging company that has to manage pedestrians and traffic out on Broadway and Havana. So again, this would be an opportunity to help increase some revenue in that area as those costs do continue to go up. And that's everything I have. Any questions?
So last year, we had a conversation with regard to cost for nonprofits that would be demonstrating out at the fair. And I thought we were left that conversation with you were going to develop a structure that would provide for those nonprofits to be able to demonstrate or, you know, distribute their information and promote, particularly in the ag industry, which is historically the reason why we have county fairs, is a celebration of harvest, the sale of animals and all that kind of stuff. And that hasn't happened and stuff. So what's your progress with regard to doing something that will promote the largest industry in the county, which is ag?
Sure. So that is something that is being worked on as a team within the county and looking at how we could set up a scholarship program to award potentially 4 scholarships, 2 groups. On average, a nonprofit pays about $500 to be at the fair all 10 days. That's including like your beekeepers, your master gardeners, some of our ag groups that you'll see around the complex. So that is in the works right now. We're working with Jeff and he's writing some language for that. I have also reached out to a number of fairs to see what they're doing. And some fairs do offer one rotator booth during the fair where you could have a one-day opportunity to come out and, you know, display and hand out materials at no charge to participate. I haven't encountered any groups that are offering a scholarship program, but, maybe they'll like what we're doing and that'll be something that'll be incorporated into the future with other fairs.
Hey Aaron, it's Jeff. So we're working with Wes in the civil office. I wasn't able to connect with them last week. Had conversations with Chris and Jim and ACO. So we are working on some ideas to present. They're just not fully baked yet.
Okay. Yeah, I would really like to see something that promotes this industry. That's the whole reason for having a fair. And, we just we seem to be moving away from that and becoming more event oriented and other activities when, ag is what drives the fair. So really would like to see something that would promote the ag industry. So anyway, thank you.
Great. Any other questions?
Mr. Jordan?
How often is this a yearly exercise, or do you look at your fees and ticket prices and parking every couple of years? What's the typical frequency of this kind of analysis?
We definitely, we look at it yearly. We have not raised our rates since 2021. So we did maintain the same rates last year. So depending, on costs and everything that we're taking into factor, we will look at adjusting these rates. So we're due to adjust, especially on our pre-sale ticket prices. Again, still very affordable, but we were long overdue in adjusting those. Those had not been adjusted in a number of years. So it'll be an annual process moving forward.
Commissioners, you'll get a chance to see in the budget process this year, Aaron and Doug have been working on a very comprehensive business plan for the Fair and Expo, not only for the Interstate Fair itself for Spokane County, but their entire operations all year long. And I think you'll be really impressed at the level of detail that they've gotten into to understand the marketplace, competition, price points, cost to operate it, and as Aaron mentioned early on, developing a plan to have a capital account growing for investments. It's not an inexpensive operation to run, nor is it an inexpensive operation to continue to maintain buildings and invest appropriately out there. So more to come for you on that front during the budget process.
Any other questions for Aaron? I'm not seeing any others. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Great. Have a great week, everyone.
Okay, you too.
Thank you.
So next, that's going to take us to Doug Chase.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm here with Rachel Hansen this morning, who is our Recreation Coordinator. And with I think the nicest, warmest spring I can recall in years, we're usually getting the calls at the end of the summer regarding the pools. And this year we've been getting all kinds of calls the school's not even quite out yet. And anyhow, we thought it would be very timely to come and announce the opening of our aquatic facility. So Rachel's going to go over that a little bit, and then I'll chat a little bit more at the end just about when we end our season.
Awesome, great. Well, thank you for your time, Rachel Hansen. Spokane County owns and operates 2 aquatics facilities. We have the Northside Family Aquatics Facility in Colbert, Washington. That is up at Bidwell Park. And then we have the Southside Family Aquatics Facility on the South Hill at Prairie View Park. Both of our facilities offer American Red Cross swim lessons and public swim sessions throughout the summer. We have exciting amenities at each facility, such as the pools are both heated. We have water slides, play features, zero depth entry, and even delicious concessions that are ran by the Spokane Indians. On select Saturdays this summer, we're going to have a couple of free community swim events going on that are brought to us by our local nonprofit sponsor, Make a Splash in a Kid's Life. And our aquatics, our aquatics facilities are family friendly. They provide a safe, clean environment for people of all ages and abilities. And there's just lots of great resources. If you hop onto our website, SpokaneCounty.org/aquatics, you'll be able to see swim lesson programs, the levels that we offer, the opportunity to get free swim lesson scholarships for low-income families that might need a little assistance getting their kids signed up for lessons. And then we also have the ability on our website to do online reservations for our public open swim sessions that we have throughout the season. Our pools will open on Monday the 19th for open swim, and it goes until Sunday, August 20th. about 9 weeks-ish. Our first day of swim lessons is actually today. So session 1 starts today at the facilities. And so there's kids in the water right now as we speak, which is exciting. We have morning and evening after school options available. For admission at our pools, we have some entry prices that are broken down by age group. So we have infants that are free, children that are $3, you know, the 3 to 5 year old age group. Youth and adults, those that are 6 to 59, that's a $6 fee, and then seniors have a $5 fee. We have 2 swim sessions throughout the day, 7 days a week. So we've got the morning session, which is 11 a.m. to 2, and we've got the 2:30 to 5:30 p.m. session. And then around that is our morning lessons, evening lessons, and swim team at our Northside facility. Yeah, and then swim lessons, we run those. We have 5 sessions all summer long. They're Monday through Thursday, 30-minute lessons typically. There's still opportunities for people to sign up. We still have scholarships available. This year, we received, about $4,000 in donations from the Make a Splash Foundation towards those swim lesson scholarships, and about recently received another donation of about $3,368 from the Airway Heights Correction Center to go towards helping get kids signed up for swim lessons and help the families in the community that just need that financial support. So that is an option, and along with those free swim events that we have throughout the summer, there's 3. If you open the calendar on the inside, you'll see the dates. There's 3 throughout, 1 each month at both locations. And then we have, birthday parties and private rentals are options as well at the facilities. Birthday party packages are just like a $75 fee that you can get an umbrella and a table and the ability to bring in an ice cream cake or a cake. Just have your family come. There's combo packages that we tie with birthday party packages. So they can families can choose to add combo meals to their party package. And then we also have private rentals as an option on Fridays and Sundays this summer, and select Saturdays. And those are just 2-hour private rentals where you can rent the facility and have the entire facility for those 2 hours from 6 to 8 p.m. on Fridays and Sundays. It's a lot of information, yes.
Ask about staffing. How's staffing going?
We are really, really fortunate. We have a lot of returners. We also have a lot of new faces this year. We have over 70 hired right now, and they're ready to go starting next Monday. Some are already starting today. And we've been really fortunate in this area. There is a shortage of lifeguards, and I know that different entities are seeing that. But I think with our location, I think that really helps us out with getting staffing. Because we haven't had any issues last year or this year, and we've been staffed, which is great.
Commissioner Waldron, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I'm just reading, making sure that everything's correct on the brochure. So you have 1 free swim event. You have it on here as July 15th, but in written as July 8th.
Oh,
So just FYI.
thank you. Oh, yes.
Because, I'm all about
Yes.
my kids will be all about
Thank
the
you.
free swim.
Yes. Well, and the main production for those haven't gone out yet, so I can correct that.
Okay,
So
good.
thank you for
Yes.
letting me
First
know.
batch,
This is the
which
first
I
batch.
was
guess we'll
hoping it
hold
was
on
a,
to
Yeah.
I was hoping it was a small batch.
Yeah.
No, but I really appreciate the free community swim days, because it just gives folks a chance to go there and not have to do the, prepay online and
Yes.
get a reservation, and that's all good. I like that process, but it's nice to not have to do that sometimes.
And we do allow walk-ups, so you can come up to the facility. We reserve a certain amount of walk-up
Right,
entries, so you can do both online or at the door. So,
So just to clarify, that the
Yes.
free community swim days, you still gotta go on and.
nope, community swim days, you just arrive at 6 p.m. on the dates that are listed on the
Says-
back calendar.
They're all
Yeah.
first come, first serve.
Yeah, first come, first serve. Yeah, until we get capacity.
But yeah, I know my daughter has several friends, one who's a lifeguard, she's a Whitworth student, and then her younger sibling, I think, might be working there this year too, so. Yeah, it's
exciting.
great to hear that you're fully staffed.
Yeah, we're in a good spot, so we're really fortunate.
Now, Rachel and Hayden start, I think, December, January. They are already working on that recruiting, so I feel a lot of it just is the work that they do, the training, the great environment that they provide for our staff, lots of ongoing training. And they start really early on that recruitment side. And again, one thing I'll point out is the closure date is the 20th. We always target about the third week in August for several key reasons. One, we lose a significant amount of our staff, our college students, and a lot of them head off. WSU starts very early, first couple weeks into August, so it would be very difficult to go beyond that. I think we looked into that last year and we had lost the staff. And secondly, attendance. With the back to school shopping, it drops off. In years ago, we were able to stay open a little bit longer, and we found that the attendance dropped off, 70-80%. It just was very dramatic. And so lastly, we target that season with the budget that we have to serve as many folks as we possibly can. And so again, when August 20th rolls around, if it's 65 degrees and rainy, it's perfect. We're brilliant. If it's 100 degrees and it's still hot for the next week, you will receive calls. So I'll apologize in advance. It's hard to predict what the weather will bring us at that time. But we really feel that it's worked out very well. Typically, I think the city of Spokane that has 4 pools will try to operate one of them an extended length of time. And I think the city of Spokane Valley, if they're staffed, they will try to operate one of theirs a little bit longer. So we're always able to steer folks to a facility that call us that time of year. But we found it really is just the kind of the sweet spot with the staffing that we have, the resources that we have. And we have a lot of great success with that. So we hope to continue that this season as well. But just thought we'd mention it.
Mr. French.
So I know that you do customer surveys for satisfaction and stuff like that. So what is it that people want to see more of at these facilities? What's the next step of growth of these facilities we need to be focusing on, whether it's concessions, more cabanas, more water features? But what are you sensing is the next step for us on these facilities?
Gosh.
Great question.
Yeah, because I think we've been able to deliver a lot of that in the last couple of years. The north side, especially with the heated splash pad, we've added additional shade structures at both sites over the last couple of years. We've been able to add the additional large, long water slides. These elements that our visitors have relayed are their favorites. We have literally been able to add those at the 2 different sites. I think another change we made to your point with the feedback is that it was way too crowded. We before had a capacity a couple years back of 500, and when it hit 500, the feedback was it's too busy. And so what we used to have one session that would go all day long, and so what we've done the last couple of years is we've broken that into 2 sessions. We've reduced the capacity down, I think 350 at one site, 325 at north, 350 at south. Having the 2 sessions, we're serving more folks, and the feedback has been super popular.
That started because of COVID, huh?
Yes, yeah, the 2 sessions help with that. The COVID helped with that, where we were, again, trying to find ways to serve more people, but we've carried that forward. And it's been really well received. And I think it's allowed us, again, we really try to limit when we raise our fees to target that 50%, 55% cost recovery. And so far, we've been able to hold on to that, and we're hoping to hold on to that again this season as we head into the summer. So the weather looks positive.
So marketing to get more people there is not necessarily, if you're already having people complaining about overcrowding, you probably don't want to exasperate that with the marketing program to say, get more people in there. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, and I think the reservation, allowing a certain number of folks to reserve online has helped. Before that traditional, let's go stand in line a half an hour before the doors open. We've been able to make that a much nicer experience for folks that like to plan ahead. It shortens those lines. And at the same time, we still provide the ability for folks who like to decide last minute, hey, let's go to the pool, it's hot out. And Yes, exactly.
Inspired.
So there's been a lot of changes, again, based on the feedback we've received over the years. And so right now we're enjoying that. We'll continue to monitor and see what type of feedback we get.
And we will be doing radio ads, just announcements of our season dates here in the next week or so. You'll see them or hear them.
Jessica, and then
Thank you, Mr. Walter. I was just curious, I know all the amazing improvements that were made to the North Side Aquatics a few years ago. We had the big opening and everything. Are there any plans for South Side Aquatics? Like the additional, especially for just the park itself and the splash pads, I know those don't exist at the south side.
We added 2 additional water slides
Okay.
and expanded the deck and added several more shade structures around the same time that we were doing the north side improvements. We were able to accomplish those a little bit more timely up south. And so I don't know that we have any additional plans right now, having just completed expansion improvements at both sides that were envisioned. And at South, we had a tower that was designed for 3 super large water slides. And initially we had just 1 up until a couple of years ago. We were able to add those 2 as the tower was designed, expand the deck, and again, it's being really well received. Really well received.
Mr. Waldron.
Oh, I was just going to, one thing in the city I did notice in the city pools, they have done kind of an evening family swim. So, cause like, you know, if you're a working family, you don't get off work till like, you know, the adults don't get off work till 5, 6 o'clock. So they did it, that was one new thing I noticed in the last couple of years that Spokane City did, is to kind of, so if you wanted to go during the week, your adults could go with kids, you know, in the evenings. So I don't know if you guys have thought about that, but.
Years ago, we experimented with a Friday evening family swim for, I want to say 2 or 3 seasons. And
You didn't get a lot.
unfortunately, it wasn't very well attended. And we also utilized the Fridays, I believe, for makeup lessons or swim lessons. And so when we lost that opportunity and given the limited response, that's why we've shifted back to where we are. But again, we're constantly monitoring. We'll see if that
That was
becomes
just one
very,
thing I
very
noticed,
popular.
but maybe it's not, you know, maybe it's not that popular, I don't know.
It seems to change a little bit from year to year. So
Yeah.
we try to keep our ear to the ground and look to customer feedback.
Any other questions for Doug? Okay, well, thank you both for being here, appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Excited for the new season to start.
Yeah.
Exciting.
And remember this briefing because you will get a call on August 21st.
Yes, you will.
It's 90 degrees out, please stay open.
Yes,
And
we always
it's
go.
helpful for Doug to do that overview. We would like
So
to,
maybe,
there's a lot of reasons why.
If we know which pools in the region are staying open later, we can get that information late in the season.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Then we can direct folks.
Yeah.
And it is kind
You
of,
know, like Witter Pool is open or
Mhm.
one in the valley is open later or
Yep.
something, okay.
absolutely.
We'll plan for
Yeah.
that. Okay,
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you. Kyle? We're running behind, and we'll see if we can
Okay.
catch up.
We'll see if we can gain a little bit of time here. So Deb Perkins is here with us this morning to talk about our tax title properties briefing. Monty's here to support as well. It's a little bit of an interesting one, but we'll try to get through it as quickly as we can and help everybody remember or learn the process.
And tax title properties are interesting properties. The treasurer forecloses on properties that have not paid their taxes for 3 years. And they hold an auction every December for those properties. And the properties that don't sell at that auction become tax title properties, and I manage those. Those properties are usually not, if they were good properties, they would have been bought at the other auction. So I'm dealing with the leftovers. Usually there's some problem with them. So before the treasurer actually holds their auction, I actually go through the list to make sure that there's no problem for the treasurer to foreclose on them. Like, it's a government-owned property. Why are we foreclosing on a government-owned property? Or it's a subservient estate inside of a plat, and I get that fixed and stuff. So I do that before the treasurer's auction. After the treasurer's auction, the ones that aren't sold, I go out immediately and secure the properties. If there's a building or something like that, I get them boarded up. If there is some other problem, I take care of it at that point. And then I'm also researching the deeds, making sure that the title company has done the work, that this really is a property. Sometimes the legal description is so bad that we're using, there is no property. So I'm looking at these things. Then I go through and I come before the board, which I'm doing today, to set the minimum bid on these tax title properties for me to be able to auction them off. I hold an auction once every year in August, and at that auction, anybody who wants to buy it for that minimum bid can bid, and it's cash only. You can't go out and get the cash and come back. You have to have it right then and there. So it's cash and carry on those. It's whereas, no warranty, you're buying the property. So those properties that still didn't sell at that auction, I then am able to sell them over the counter for that minimum bid for a year afterwards. So every year I come before the commissioners to set a new minimum bid. And every year in August, I hold another auction. Now, previous boards have asked me before I go through and auction off these properties to please send a letter to the adjoining property owners, put a sign out on top of the property, and it's by law, I have to put it in the newspaper for 3 weeks to hold the auction. But that is the extra things that I do for those properties. If an adjoining property owner, if that property is not a buildable property, or if it is less than $500 in assessed value, I can sell to an adjoining property owner, but I have to come back in front of the board to do that, because it has to go through an auction for me to be able to sell it over the counter. So, that's about it for what the tax title auction. So I have a number of properties that, I did come in front of the board in 2013 to ask the board to give me directions on how to set the minimum bid so that I can present that. And they did go through and give me a method for setting the minimum bid. So the first year, it's either the assessed value or the principal amount of back taxes owed, whichever is greater. The next year, it's the assessed value. The year after that, it's 75% of the assessed value. The next year, it's 50%, 25%, 10%. Then it's $1.
Wow, what a deal.
Come on.
So, as you see, this year, I have one parcel that's $1. I have 2 that are 75, 2 that are 50, one that's 590, one that's 75, and then the last one, which is $3,435. And if you looked at the list of if you looked at all the pictures, you'd see I've got like a 15-foot strip between 2 properties. I have a half alleyway. I have, another half alleyway, a 1-foot strip of property, another little tiny bit, a fence line, another foot strip, half alleyway, and then the other one between the freeway and the railroad right-of-way. So there isn't much. All right, do you guys have any questions for me?
So I would guess most of the time it's an adjacent owner that would be interested, and if they're not, it just goes through this whole process.
Yeah, it goes through the
I mean,
process.
they would bid on it, I would think, or try and purchase it over the counter.
Well, a
what
lot
have
of the times, like on those half alleyways and stuff like that, they come to me and they say, who in their right mind would buy this half alleyway next to my house? Why should I spend the money to buy this half alleyway?
Yeah, you get to use it anyway, why
Why
pay
do
for it?
Well, I then have to tell them horror stories. And I had a gentleman who had an RV, who liked to imbibe in substances, and he would go through and buy a half alleyway. And then he would park his RV out there and have fun, and the cops would come and he would show them the deed.
Oh my goodness.
Smart.
And so
Right.
is it, and they would end up spending a lot more than the $75 for that, to have him leave. So, half alleyways and that, it is advisable for homeowners to buy those pieces of property. And, I've owned half of a swimming pool, I've owned half of a garage, I've owned a person's backyard, I've owned their driveway. And there are a lot of those late night commercials saying get rich quick on tax title property, and, you wanna use your driveway? That's how they do it. So, that's what those properties. Any more questions?
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next item is a grant we received related to the Doris Morrison Learning Center. So Ben and Nikki are here to tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Commissioners. Ben Bradabo, Water Program Manager, and Nikki Fighton, Water Resources Project Manager. And Nikki spends a lot of time with the Doris Morrison Learning Center and Salty Flats, and so is familiar with those projects. And so we have two items today. This first one, both of them are related to the Doris Morrison Learning Center. And this first one is related to a grant that we applied for a year ago and received word from the State Recreation and Conservation Office that were approved for the grant. It's under a program called No Child Left Inside Grant. And so the state is doing a lot of work to try to improve environmental education for students. And so this is a $75,000 grant that we would receive to essentially create programming, work with teachers to get them to the Doris Morrison Learning Center, provide busing for kids to get there, pay for teachers to a stipend for them to incentivize them to use the facility. And then it also, kind of a key piece at the end, is it creates a program where we're going to teach and train these teachers so that they could go back to the Doris Morrison Learning Center and Salties Flats without county staff there. And so it creates some programs and curriculum that they can use and teach on their own without county staff having to support their activities. So we're really eager to do that and take advantage of both the building and the wetland site. It's really focused on wetland education. And so this is kind of our first program heading forward with the operations of the Learning Center. And to receive the grant, we need to have a board resolution to approve it, and that will be coming here at a following meeting. Any questions on that? And I guess it works with all of Central Valley and East Valley school districts, so two districts in the valley, not including West Valley. They have a West Valley Outdoor Learning Center, and we are working with West Valley on operating the Learning Center, but in this case, it doesn't include West Valley School District. Any questions on that?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Just excited.
Yeah, and then the second one. Second item, I think, is next. Also on the Doris Morrison Learning Center. And this is an agreement with Avista for net metering. So we have installed solar panels on the roof of the Doris Morrison Learning Center. This is a photo from each side of the center. You can't see the panels because they're on the roof. But we received grant funding for that and installed the panels up there. And so then the next step is to have an agreement with Avista where it will be net metered, where we'll use the power on site. And if it's not enough, we'll buy from Avista. And if we generate excess power, we run our meter backwards and credit us for future use on that. And this is a small solar installation. And so that's what Avista's method is, to do net metering on this, similar to what you see on homes in maybe in your neighborhood. And so we have an agreement with them to follow the rules and work with them and it requires board approval. And so that'll be coming to you at a future meeting here as well. Questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Very good, thank you.
I told Andy 10 minutes, somebody was heading over right now.
Okay.
What you got?
So we have one last briefing. We were running a little behind here, so we've been communicating with staff coming through. But we're gonna pull up our snow season debrief and recap from our winter here. So we've got our director, our road maintenance administrators coming over right now, as well as our, what is Becca's title? I'll have her introduce herself. I can't remember her title. Anyway, to get through an update on where we sat from winter and talk with you all about how you felt it went with regards to our level of service and how you felt the customers of the county were served throughout this year. We had a pretty big winter, and we have some great data to show you on how that's going to turn out. And the weather information really kind of drove our spend on this winter, and as you might expect, we spent a lot of money this winter trying to keep the roads safe. It's kind of, at least in my perspective, it is
We had
what it
about
is.
5 winners this last year.
Yeah,
Insane.
we had a big one. We actually, so we have a service that we pay for through a company called WeatherNet, where we get localized forecasts for our region. You know, the Spokane County's large enough that actually weather in the south and the north might be very different. You know, we have storms, we get well over a foot of snow in the north parts of the county and might only get a few inches down south. So it was really timely. About a month ago, 3 weeks ago, we did our debrief with WeatherNet, because we all feel things about winter, and it seemed like it was a long winter. Snow was on the ground for a long time. Well, they actually provided us a full data debrief on everything, so we'll present you some of that information. So here's Andy and Becca, and they will start walking through this presentation.
So sorry about that. You guys were running late, so I thought I had to leisurely walk until I saw Ben outside. So I'm Andy Shank. I am the Maintenance and Operations Manager. And this is Becca McConaughey. She is the Maintenance Administrator. She does everything behind the scenes. Data collection, budgets, plans, all of that. She helps us keep track of where we're at. So again, thank you for letting me be here, and I apologize again for being late. So the goals today is just to talk about, summarize our winter for 22 to 23. It's difficult. We talk about winter season, which basically goes from October to April, but that's over 2 budget seasons because our budgets start in January. So pulling out some of the data and trying to make it all work together can be difficult at times. But today we're going to talk about the weather, which Kyle kind of already got into a little bit, labor, equipment, budgets, and then kind of where we want to go. So our level of service, I think this year we provided a really good level of service. You know, last year we built those snow gates. Our people in-house designed them. We had 26 of them that had a universal mount, so they went on both types of our graders. And so in all of our curbed residential areas, we used the boot. We had a lot of requests to use the boot out in the rural areas. But with the wing and stuff, it doesn't work well. So again, we use it in the curbed areas. We had some growing pains with it, how to use it properly. But once we got the hang of it, I think our guys were happy with it because we got less complaints and aggressive citizens. So I think that was a very good plus for us.
Sounds like a plus.
Yes.
Were pulled on us this year.
Yeah.
Otherwise known as armed.
Yeah. You know, disgruntled, whatever you want to call them. I believe we had fewer calls this year. And just in my mind, a lot of our calls came from and we got some head shaking there. A lot of our calls this year seem to come from the rural areas. And I started kind of tracking the area codes on the phone numbers, and a lot of those were outside the area. And, you know, I didn't keep any stats on it, but just, I kind of looked at the area code before I called them back, so I knew kind of how I had to prep the conversation with them. And then two other things I noticed too in the rural areas. I think during COVID, some people moved up to the rural areas because they could work online and stuff. Well, now maybe they have to report to work more consistently. And I mean, Coth Road's one, it's, you know, basically Idaho state line, Newman Lake, and it goes up into the mountains. It's about 5 miles long, there's about 11 houses, but it's really the last on our list. And a lady complained to me several times that she had to put chains on to get out. You know, and I tried to explain to her that, you know, we start with our arterials first, high volumes, and work our way to that. And, you know, we'll get there as soon as we can, usually that day 4-ish, but you might have to have chains to get out. We have to have chains to get there. So some tough conversations. And then the last group that I've seen is, and I probably get into that age too, the elderly, or as they're getting older, they've lived there for 30 years and they're getting tired of getting on their tractor and plowing themselves out or helping themselves. And so, you know, we're working with them and trying to make sure we get service there. It's just taking us a little longer. Again, some of the complaints we did, the boots helped us get more thank yous this year. So I think that was good. We had 2, I call them major snow events, where we called an all county plow, if you want to use some city terminology, where we worked 24/7. And the first one started on the 1st of December and we completed it on the 5th. The next one started on the 9th and completed it on the 13th. And I say that was 4 days because that's the day we declare. So it takes a shift, a day for our guys to really get fully ramped and working those 12-hour shifts. This year we also added, and we started it last year on the residential areas. We tried to do color coding on when we were going to be in their residential area and when we completed it. I think that helps people prepare, knowing when we're going to get there. And then it does help us. We do miss some stuff. So if it shows up as completed, we'll get the phone calls and say, hey, you didn't complete this. And usually it was a breakdown or shift change and we just missed that street. We also have the web-based snow plows tracking. That's just on the plows and the graders. We implemented the 7-day work week and an all. So what I mean by the 7-day work week, per contract, we were able to add a weekend shift. It was a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday shift. In the past, we were only call outs on Saturday, Sunday, something different from the city. And then during those storms, we were able to go to the 2 12-hour shifts. And those were contract issues that was implemented a couple of years ago. And then because of staffing levels going into this year, we talked about using the de-icing products more to help us gain on those storms, like the anti-icing before the storm hit, and then using our other chemicals so that being short-staffed, we didn't have to get back hopefully as soon. We changed our district boundaries this year for the snow, because of staffing levels. We increased and expedited the use of the private contractors. We use those mainly out in the valley and down in District 2, so Spangle area. And overall, I believe, again, I'm going back to it, I think we provided a higher and more consistent level of service this year than we have in the past. Even being, I think we're 21 staff members going into winter down. So good news is we're about 5 down now. So we've hired a lot through the winter. Some of them came with good experience that we could put out on the road right away, and some of them took some training. So next stat, this is the one that kind of hits home, and there's a lot of background that Kyle kind of told you about. We had this report from WeatherNet. This winter felt real long to me. And looking at it,
Not
it
the only
was.
It dumped so bad in
Yeah.
November.
Yeah.
Man, it started early.
Like November 7th, I think, not that I'm counting, and I think the last snow that I have a picture of is April 21st. But as you see, just the
Earlier
highlights,
next year.
we had about a month more of freezing days. We had 8 more days of snow. And then our snowfall was about a foot more than we normally get. So all that adds up, but this next slide is the one that, this is a long winter. So this is how many days did we have snow on the ground, not snowfall. And if you look at the average, it says 55, but if you actually pull out this year's 104, the average is 45. So we almost doubled the days that we had snow on the ground. And it was a long winter.
Just looking at this graph.
Andy's still scarred.
So,
And then it just went right into summer.
yeah, we don't have to change the seasons anymore, and everyone seems to talk about that. It goes from summer, well, we were hauling gravel that first week in November, and then we scrambled to get everything changed over to plow snow that second week, and then it never left us. So the next stat is just material usages, and this is probably one of my most boring presentations I've given you guys because there's just a lot of numbers, but I wanted to highlight a few of them for you. We started using liquid basically up north and in the valley where we had the residential areas back in the mid 15-ish, 15, 16. And then we've kind of been increasing its usage through all the districts. And you look at the material up and down, and then you got to go equate it to the snowfall. But the one thing that I think you can see we're doing is we're trying to use these de-icer products to the best of our ability. So we use the liquid a lot of times as an anti-ice. We put it down before the storm gets here. Sometimes we do a great job and the weather people do a good job and we get it and it doesn't rain and wash it away. But we're trying to watch all reports and use the material the best we can. I was just down in Portland last week for the Pacific Northwest Snow Fighters. And that was the big talk of all of this conference was really how do you use the materials appropriately so that you can get the best usage out of them and the best benefit. And there's some things we can definitely improve on. There's some things where we're right on line with what everybody else is doing. But the liquid we really used the last couple of years as an anti-icing, put it down before that snow comes, keeps that bond off the road, makes it easier for us to plow. And then the granular, we didn't increase as much on it this year. You can see 54% increase on our liquid over average. The granular, which is our what we call ice slicer, and you put that on compact, it only went up 14%. So really, if you look at those numbers, we're doing things right because it shows hopefully that we're not getting as much compact on the road that we have to treat later on. And then the salted sand, that's our cheapest, and we call it salted sand or sand salt because there's just enough salt to keep the pile from freezing. And we use that really outside of the curbed areas where we can just sweep it off the shoulder. And that went up 29%, but as long as the winter was, I'm kind of surprised that number's not a little higher.
Yes, are the granular de-icer in the sand soil, is that pounds, is that cubic yards, is that what's that measurement in?
Tonnage, right?
Yeah, let's see, the salted sand is cubic yards.
Cubic yards.
Okay.
Most of them are cubic yards,
Okay.
actually.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Our
And then the
contracts
liquid
are tons.
de-icer is gallons?
Gallons, yes. So it's gallons and cubic yards.
Okay.
Even though we purchase in pounds, but our guys, when they're loading it up, they just, how many scoops you put in, that's how many cubic yards we put up. So again, you can see it's not an exact science, because if someone loads it and says, okay, each bucket was 10 cubic, or each scoop was 5 cubic yards, I put 2 on. Well, if they're only getting 4.5, then we lose a little bit, or if they're getting 5.5, then our truck's a little heavy when they go out the road. So the next one was equipment, and a couple things to point out here. You see in 18-19, we had a real high year. If you remember that year, we had a lot of drifting down south. I mean, the state, I don't believe, could keep Highway 27 open. We had the same thing on the county road. So you see our equipment usage was high that year, but it went high again this year. And then one thing, when you're looking at these numbers, we said, well, why is our equipment hours more than our labor hours? Well, some of our equipment, it's actually two pieces of equipment. So like a truck, and if we put a sander body on them, those are two pieces of equipment, because we track them separately. Because that truck will be used all year, that sander body is only used during the winter months. Now our new trucks, the sander body is incorporated in the body, we don't have that. So you can't always just compare it, but the big thing is the average here is about almost 7,500 more hours than average is what we use this year on equipment. The next slide is labor. Kind of the same thing here. At first we looked at it and said, well, why we're down people? Why is labor so high this year? Well, because winter started the 1st of November and went into April. So that's why that was so high. Again, our guys put in a lot of time, a lot of overtime. But then what really helped us out is the bottom there. The contractors this year they did good work. We assigned them routes, and we would basically call them when the storm hit, and they would just go take care of it, and then we just have to check it and maybe do a little cleanup. But the contractors did really good this year.
Just have one little point of clarification on this is that when you see the labor hours for winter, that's not just that's a baseline of how many hours our staff would have normally worked. That's truly hours coded to winter activity. Very often in a normal winter, we will not be doing winter activities all winter. We'll have a nice dry spell. We'll go out, we'll do some ditching, we'll go out and do some maintenance work, and those are coded differently. So these are truly attributed to winter activities only.
Yeah, good point. Thanks, Kyle. It is. This is just 100% winter activities. And again, that's where it balances out, because a lot of times if we're not doing snow removal, we are out brushing and getting prepared for the ditches and stuff for spring and all that stuff. So this slide, I just wanted to kind of show some history here. And again, Becca is the one that helped pull all these numbers, so I want to thank her again. But you know, some good facts here is that the equipment increase for winter activities from 2017 till today is $1.8 million. So I mean, not adding anything else, that's just the cost of how stuff has gone up. Fuel costs, this is the big shocker, you know, from 19 to 22, the average for diesel was $2.57. Now it's $5.27. That really impacts the amount of work we can do within our budgets. And then labor's gone up. You can see there 37% from 18 to 23. And the cost of materials has gone up. Liquid is 18% and 8% for the granular. And a lot of that is trucking costs. That was one thing that was talked at the conference now is sometimes the trucking costs are more than the material that's on the truck. And everywhere, I know they were talking like in some little communities to do rail and stuff to try to ship in bigger quantities just to cut down the truck or the shipping costs. We're lucky here being in Spokane. I think we get a little bit break on that because we are the central hub for a lot of these companies that supply to the de-icer. But the other communities that are farther out are really paying a premium on that. Any questions? Okay, next slide. We wanted to just kind of highlight our maintenance and preservation budgets. And again, these work hand in hand. We tried to say, okay, what is maintenance, what is preservation? But like Kyle said, is as we go into winter, if we have a light winter, then we're doing more sweeping and we're putting gravel on gravel roads. We're ditching, brushing, stuff like that. So it's really hard to compare these budgets because they are really driven by the weather. And if I could control the weather, I'd probably not be here and I'd have a better job. But you know, we rely on Mother Nature to tell us what our work is. And just a couple highlights, if you look highlighted on the last column down towards the bottom, Last year, we spent $3.4 million just in December. And our budget is usually 3.6 million. And a lot of that, I think everything but $1 million was absorbed inside our maintenance budget from other activities we hadn't done. But if you look at it, we budget for about 3.6 every year. And on average, we're spending about 4.2. Now, should we increase that? You know, I hate to spend too much on winter. That's our job. But we might want to look at shifting a little bit over to winter. But again, we're trying to get the best bang for our buck. So wherever it's at, we do balance in between. If we go really like 19, we had to go and it came out of Public Works, but I think in 19, they did a shift of about $1 million over to maintenance after that winter with all the drifting down south. And then this year, and Becca and I and Matt have been talking about it. If you look at it, we spent 3.4 million out of our 3.6, and usually it's at 2/3, 1/3. So we spend 2/3 in the spring, 1/3 in the fall. So we're about $1 million short going into fall. So we're looking at our gravel road, which is a preservation budget. Do we cut back on the roads we re-gravel this year? Do we cut back on maybe some of our paving activities? I don't want to cut, I guess I'm going towards the gravel road is why I talked about it first, because if you cut back on our paving, that then affects our chip seal next year, because this year we're paving to get our roads in shape to chip seal next year. So I'm trying to balance these and work within our budget the best we can, but still provide the service that we need to provide.
And Andy has already guaranteed me though that we're not gonna have any issues. It's snowing on January 1st next year. So from a budgetary standpoint, it's not gonna snow in December or November.
Should, that's a good goal. And then kind of the last page is, just.
Sorry, could I ask about that? So since the snow season, straddles 2 budget years, do you have like a fund that just continually gets filled and you're using it across multiple years? Is that the way it works?
Part of our road fund.
Okay.
Our road fund balance is,
So
we
is that what
budget on the annual cycle, but that's not the dollars in the account from the standpoint of.
Right, right. So when you say, obviously last November, December, we had to spend a lot more on the snow removal and the de-icing, and so what is the current impact then on the road fund?
Well, so it adjusts kind of our that buffer balance, which we like to keep around 4.5 million. Is that minimum balance, because with the timing of when the funds come in, we want to make sure we're managing that pretty well. So we get to look at that over 6 years out and make sure that we're projecting our spends and that balance.
If it's possible to see that, do you have that over 6 years? Do you have like a budget line that you could share?
Absolutely.
After, okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to spend it all on road maintenance, but they won't let me.
Yeah, well, snow happens.
So it's that combination of our maintenance activities, our preservation activities, our winter activities, and then what our portion of capital projects are. So those are kind of the big 4. And so,
Similar as at the city of Spokane. So I was just curious to see where we were and what are you projecting on that, so, okay.
It's really close to how the city budget operates.
Similar.
Yeah.
It was kind of this fund that would ebb and flow, and then we'd have to try and predict for each budget year how much we should allocate.
And how much we kind of leave in case you need it and stuff like that.
Okay. And the some of the impacts, I mean, I think we see the escalation of material costs and labor and things like that, but some of the more dramatic ones are those fuel costs and our equipment costs. Just what we have to pay for new equipment now, therefore what we have to budget to be able to pay for that equipment, it's really taken a sharp turn. So it's just, we have to be thoughtful. We're just not able to do as much to stay within our boundaries.
Yeah, that's a good example is, you know, when we were set rates, I think we had at $20 an hour, which you think is expensive for a truck. But if you look at the damage that we did to the plows and stuff this year, plus the fuel costs, you know, we're probably right in the ballpark, but you add $20 to as many hours as we spent on a truck plow. That was a huge cost to us that, you know, when you're sitting in the fall looking at it, it's like, oh, $20 is no big deal. But when it's added every hour and every piece of equipment, and you use them all winter long, it was a big impact. So.
Oh, please, go ahead.
So I will share with you that preventative maintenance was one of the topics at the last CRAB board meeting, and Spokane County was recognized as one of the best counties in the state when it comes to preventative road maintenance, whether it's our sealing program or a chip seal program or whatever. You do a really good job at doing that. So just compliment our staff for staying on top of that. And it's recognized the work you do.
Thank you, and that's Becca's team. She manages the pavement managers, and they go out and, you know, rating all our roads and coming up with a plan to best use our money. We were about 8 years for chip seals, and now we're kind of stretched that out to 9 to 10. We're really looking at the road condition and saying, okay, this one can go a year. What maybe needs to move up, or what more can we do down the line? So.
And that in conjunction with your chip or your crack seal program, and you know, just trying to keep the water out of the road.
How do you decide how much contractor hours to use? How does that work? And then how does the last year's number compare with previous years?
So this was and I have to get you the specifics. This was the most we've used the contracts for, and we kind of use them as a stopgap. So now, like I say, we're down about 5 employees. Hopefully by winter we'll be down less. So hopefully next year, if weather's somewhat similar, we would use less contractors. But this year, and these contractors, all of the agencies are trying to get the same contractors. Right. So in the past, I think we used to try to wait and say, do we really need them? This year, we probably went a little sooner, and we did need them. But if you go too late, the city of the Valley already has them, or the city of Spokane already has them under contract. They all have a blanket contract, I guess, but it's who calls first usually gets them. And then how easy are the agencies working with them? So what we did this year is we called them earlier, and then we gave them a set route. So then the next storm, their operators were kind of like our operators, back in the same set route. So they kind of knew what they were going to do, and it got easier for them. But I can look up that number and give you what we spent on contractors last 3 years or something like that. Okay. So really, in conclusion, I think we've had a longer winter, as I felt, and it shows. We had increased labor costs, increased equipment and operation costs, but I think overall we gave a higher level of service. And I hope Ron and everybody over here that answers the phone felt the same thing that we were feeling. A lot more thank yous, a lot less complaints. And we'll always get complaints, but it seemed to be less. So just kind of letting you guys know where we're at. And I was here a few months ago talking about our summer program. That will probably be impacted some. And we're not quite sure yet. We're analyzing the numbers. I'm kind of pushing towards the gravel roads. I hate to say that. They're the ones that always get pushed off, but I think our paved roads are one of our biggest assets, and we've got to try to maintain that the best we can. Any questions? Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Enjoy the sunshine.
Thank you.
Last picture of snow geese or snow plows in the front.
Yeah.
Okay, Jeff and Heather, you guys are up next.
So this is a bit of a throwback. We're going to talk about boards and commissions.
No.
It's an easy one. You'll recall the Notion Advisory Board. We passed an ordinance because it was an ordinance form that changed it from 2 per district to all 7 at large. And then all 7 of the previous members wanted to be reappointed. Y'all agreed to that. We actually briefed you on this April 10th. Somehow it didn't make the consent agenda the following week. And it was just noticed last week when one of the members who was reappointed just emailed to confirm, and I couldn't find the resolution number. And I think what happened was it was briefed on the 10th. I was on vacation the 13th to 20th. I didn't follow up to make sure it happened. So unless anybody has concerns, the exact same thing that was before you and briefed on April 10th that was not on consent on the 18th will appear before you tomorrow, actually, on consent. That works for everybody. There were 2 members who had expired in 22, 2 members that expired early 23. All of them will have new terms that start on April 18th. And then the other 3 were mid-cycle. We left them, the dates didn't change. They just went from either being the at-large or specific district to all being at-large. So the paperwork's in your packet.
So no more vacations for you.
Because that's the moral of the story.
Is that what you got out of the presentation? Okay.
Nothing's appeared before this committee since pre-COVID, so it's not slowing any work or any challenges. We just want to have our ducks in a row should something appear before the committee.
And so I guess I'm not seeing them in our briefing here. So is it gonna be on tomorrow's agenda or is it?
We put it on tomorrow's since it was already briefed and supposed to be done. If you guys would like to push it back a week, of course, that's your decision to
Is it on tomorrow? Does it show up?
It does show up.
It is.
Okay.
2A.
Oh, 2:08, great.
Do we have the list of names just to refresh ourselves with it?
Mike Britton, Thomas Miller, and Robin Ball are the 3 that are midterm. One of them actually expires next week, so he'll be back. And then Clark Bergerend, David Bray, Jeffrey Meyer, and Jeffrey Ewing are the 4 that had expired in 22 and 23 that will be re-upped. And their term will be effective April 18th of this year until April 18th of 27.
Very good.
And those are
Yeah.
the 7 people that were on the committee prior.
But
Thank you.
it says from 3 to 5 members. Is that accurate?
Reflects the expansion of the
Oh,
Board of
okay.
County
Oh, got it.
Commissioners.
That's the
3 to 5
increase.
members.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay,
That was
That's
us.
us.
but, got it.
So all 7 members of the advisory will be at large, appointed by a majority of the board. And that's already done in ordinance. That part didn't get fully done.
Great. Thank you.
And then under miscellaneous, I had one thing, if you want that.
We have you next as
Oh, Simply Fiber? Oh, I guess I did my miscellaneous first, I'm sorry. Simply Fiber, that's the reason we're here today.
I know Heather's like looking at you like, why am I here, Jeff?
Wait, was she working with you on that ordinance?
Sorry.
No.
I went out of order, my apologies. ARP, the board awarded $100,000 to Patera back in July of last year. They're a broadband company, and it was for a project in Medical Lake. The project has been completed. Patera was purchased by Ziply Fiber. They're nationally, a lot of the broadband companies do not like open access. They would like to receive the funds and build it out, and then they would own it. It's a great business plan if you can get it. The county has decided open access is the way to go. Ziply Fiber notified Heather, what, 2 weeks ago now? That they are going to sever the contract, as is allowed by the contract. They would rather not have these funds than sign a document that says open access anywhere. They did not say that, that is our interpretation. They just let us know that they would like to sever the contract. We talked with the mayor of Medical Lake. They are working on this project and expanding the project. This was awarded in a partnership with Medical Lake. Medical Lake put 100,000 of their ARP in it. We put 100,000 of our ARP in it to get their downtown core wired much better. Having attended a couple meetings out there, I can attest to the fact it wasn't good as of a year ago. So what we're suggesting is changing categories, taking the $100,000 out of broadband other, where it was originally awarded, putting it into transfer to other units of government. That's a category that you can transfer funds only to a unit of government that already received ARP funds, which Medical Lake did. So we put that same $100,000 into the transfer to other unit of government funds. That way Medical Lake can then pay for these services. They legally can use $100,000 any way they want. We are not allowed to have strings on transfers to other units of government. So this would be an award of $100,000 to Medical Lake. It's very comfortable people use it for these purposes because they have the bills to pay. Just in full disclosure, you guys need to know that.
How much of the 100,000 is unspent?
The entire balance. Tara did fill anything.
So what are those bills that they have to pay?
It would be continuation of their downtown out. Likely they would put out an RFP, and then it would be obvious it's going to be the city's ownership of open access lines versus any internet provider owning the lines.
The mayor of Medical Lake sits on the front board, she's the vice chair, so I'll watch from that perspective what happens.
So I guess I was trying to, so they are putting their own 100,000 into the project?
They did, yes.
Okay. But
I believe that's all Patera has billed.
Okay.
Is the 100,000.
But they're not requiring it to be.
They could, because they received less than $10 million, their funds all come out under revenue replacement. So those, we both have revenue replacement funds don't have. They could have written in open access restrictions. I think they just put it in their general fund and they did it from general fund.
But the idea was the total match was 200,000. And now there's
$200,000 worth
and
of
now there's
work.
this 100,000 that still needs to probably be paid back for the work that was done to
And
install.
I think what will happen will be some additional work done. Okay. Since Patera is choosing to not bill us, I think they're just eating some of their profit margin. Talking with the mayor, she said the plan would be to expand this out further from the core where it currently is, that main intersection between City Hall and the main intersection. And then the goal, of course, is to keep going on out into the residential areas, but this isn't enough money to look at that. Okay.
So we do have Arian's got her hand up.
Perfect.
Arian, go ahead. Oh, you just muted.
Yes, I was just promoted. I did want to add, Mayor Cooper was very helpful to understand that the original scope with as well as fiber, it happens midstream. So a large portion of the wireless it functions.
That's why we need to do this.
This is why we need better service. This is.
I will say the first floor of Public Works has service comparable to Medical Lake. You're just cutting up.
I can,
I think we're on the good
okay. I can walk over if you want, that's fine.
No, that's okay, go ahead and try
Okay.
it.
So in that, this piece that if you do choose to do the transfer unit of government would preserve the fiber component that they really want to undergird for Medical Lake. And so it really was a clean break point. And to Jeff's point, it seems like that's not the direction that Ziply was wanting to go. So the original scope that we wanted to support has been done outside of us, and this would just preserve the scope that really hadn't even started with the original intent of what the county in their match to the RFP was hoping to undergird Medical Lake in.
So, we can't put these strings on it, but you are confident that their intent is to use it for these purposes, based on your conversation?
Based on our conversation with the mayor, yes. But there is no legal
No
requirement.
requirement. Correct. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I do know they want to continue this project, so.
They'd like to put some fiber in the ground
Yes.
along there versus just the current
Yes.
aerial. And so to do that, they're gonna have to go with an RFP to do that section of. So, if you guys are good with this, it'll be on consent next Tuesday. Sometimes I get it
Yeah, I do know it's the intent of the mayor and the council to continue on with the project that has completed the services. And had not been for Petra and Ziply changing their structure, this would have been a non-event. So it's, you know, the same outcome, we're just gonna change the names.
We will put this on, consent next week.
Are there any other miscellaneous items? Okay.
One quick update, I'm sure Commissioner French already knows about this. The State Building Code Council voted to delay the implementation of the 2021 building codes for 120 days. So they were set to go into effect July 1, and now it's a 120-day push out. Our team's still been communicating with the home builders and other contractors. Usually what we see is a big run up right before the code implementation. Everyone tries to get permits pulled under the last code update. So we see a big rush and influx of permits, which we will probably not see as much, but we're trying to work with the contractors and make them aware so they're starting to use the 4 months to come in a normal, more normal pace, if you will, but no guarantees on it. But I just wanted to make you aware of that.
Can I comment on that? So two things have happened, you know, when I was on the Building Code Council, they kept on saying the changes were going to negatively impact affordability of housing. And the legislature acknowledged that the changes they made were going to negatively impact affordability of housing. And in fact, there was a bill, the legislature actually sent the Building Code Council back to say, reconsider what you did because it didn't accomplish our goals. But the other thing that's negatively, or that has happened is the US District Court has ruled that their ban on natural gas was illegal and violated federal statutes. And so now they've got to go back and reconsider their energy code on top of their building code. So everything that I told them was going to happen has happened, and God, I feel vindicated. So, but other than that, you know, they're gonna have to hit the pause, which they've done, and go back and redo a lot of the work that they should have done right the first time. So anyway, a little editorializing, but you know, why not?
Okay, second thing,
Just real quick, what was the timeframes of when things were
Originally,
supposed
the
to
Building Code
apply?
Council, originally the new building code was supposed to go into effect July 1. And so now they pushed it out until this fall, which goes through another building cycle, which was critical. But, you know, I think the 120 days is optimistic. I think they're gonna end up having to push it out further than that just to comply with statutes on how they can change the code, because all of that's controlled by RCW and WAC.
Okay, next topic are the commissioner meeting proposed changes and the agenda changes. So back on the 22nd of May, we had a conversation around, do we want to implement these? Do we want to hold on them? Mr. Jordan had presented a variety of recommendations on the agenda briefing sheets and content in there. So we had been communicating with across the county our other electeds and department heads that this was coming. The change not only to the meeting times, but also trying to get tighter with putting in agenda sheets for briefing. I did not communicate out to them that we were pausing or anything because I wanted them to begin using the agenda briefing sheets, using Civic Clerk for what its intended purposes are. So as I chatted with Commissioner Jordan last week, kind of on how it's going, and also chatted a little bit with Commissioner Cuny and Commissioner Kearns. I don't think we walked out, maybe all of us, with clarity on this 22nd of the where we were going. So I wanted to give you an update on kind of where how Gina and I and the team are doing things from the agenda side. So she and Shelley are looking at all the briefing material coming in, ensuring that there is an agenda sheet attached, that the team is using the system versus using paper, and filling out the fields in there. We have been finding some where more of our frequent users of the agendas are already up and using this, but we have some outliers that are still using paper. So we're reaching out, reminding them of what the process is. So we're doing a little QA on that to make sure that we are filling those out. There is a one change that Commissioner Jordan had asked for, and it's including in the briefing sheet other departments that would be impacted and they have been consulted. That's an IT change. Our IT individual who supports Civic Clerk has been out for some time. So once they get back in, Gina will be working with them to get the additional field in there just to make sure we have the touches across the other departments in there. So we don't have 100% compliance with it right now, but we're measuring, we're reviewing, we're reaching back out, we're doing some additional training if it's needed. Generally, it's those departments that are a little bit less frequent with this, just reminding them of what the process is to be able to follow. So that's what we're doing on this side. I think Commissioner Jordan had something perhaps he wanted to bring up on the publishing of the Tuesday, even though we're on Monday, the Go Forward Tuesday board briefings.
Sure, I reached out to Scott because part of the proposal or recommendation I put together was that it said that any available supporting materials, agenda, item cover sheets, and available supporting materials will be posted publicly concurrently with the agenda. So I reached out to Scott just with a kind of as a check-in. My recollection from our discussion as a group was there were certainly some questions about what I proposed. I think particularly from Commissioner French, we had a discussion about the departments being notified versus approving and that kind of thing. I think as I recall, Commissioner Cuny wanted some kind of trial period and adjust as needed. But I didn't hear any specific objection to that piece of it. And I think what I remember is that we agreed to do a trial period. So I just hadn't seen that done yet and checked in with Scott on it. So that was my feeling from the discussion was we were gonna, I put this all in writing, we agreed to try it, and it's partially in place, so.
I think we had a discussion though on, if it's draft and is draft actually supposed to be out there for the public or not. And making sure that if it is draft, that it's marked draft and that the departments all know that it's draft. And recently I was talking with Commissioner Janicki over in Skagit County and they're not releasing anything that's draft. So I think we need to really look into going to, because I think each county handles it differently is what I'm hearing for public records and all of that. as to what's really, so this is more recent than you and I talked, but talking to Lisa, what really is to be out there for the public, if it's draft, because once you put it out there to the public, then it's really no longer draft. And so I want to get some clarity on that.
And so as far as the Public Record Act goes, I'll give you the classic legal answer where it depends, right? It depends on what the document is, right? Is it a
Talking about
new
the
code?
cover sheets is what we're talking about, right?
No,
he's talking about
supporting
supporting
documents.
documentation.
Talking about supporting
Oh,
documents is
okay.
what I
Right.
interpreted. Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Both, yeah.
so really it depends on what the document is. You know, as far as the Public Records Act goes, the general overview is that the draft exception is used for a document such as a contract or a code provision or a policy, the actual content of a policy, and if that is in draft form and the release of such ahead may affect that or something to that extent, that's what the draft exception of the Public Records Act is for, as opposed to, say, a draft of a presentation, a draft of a PowerPoint, something like that would generally probably not fall under that exception. Haley Day in our office and Tony Donaro are kind of putting together something more comprehensive to kind of explain the differences and the application of that specific public records exception. And I anticipate they'll have something kind of put together as far as a training and an explanation to provide to both the board and other county departments on how to apply that when it does and doesn't apply. But yes, to the point, certainly once something is published and pushed out on an open website, then it would be out there for public consumption. And so, though I will say, under the Public Records Act, obviously once it's published out on the website, it's out there. Any public records request that comes in, the exceptions are applied without regard to what has been released before. And so it is not, for example, like an attorney-client privilege, where once that privilege has been breached, the privilege is breached and those documents are open. Public records requests are reviewed more or less in a vacuum each time they come in.
So, maybe we need to parse this out a little bit so that those items that appear on our agenda for action, you can include the supporting documents as well as the agenda item. But because more than likely, if it's coming to us for action, it's no longer in a draft format and stuff. So, but if it's something for our briefing and stuff, that would not go out to the public because it's not in final format. And what I found is that when you start to put working documents out there, the public is no longer served, because then they don't know which draft they're looking at. They don't know where they're at in the debate. And so that becomes a little bit more problematic. Are you informing the public, or are you confusing the public because it's draft and they don't know where you're at and stuff? So what would happen if we parse those two elements out? And would that address your concern?
I'm trying to understand the distinction that you're making.
Distinction is that if you're publishing the agenda for final action by the board, that the agenda would include all supporting documents and everything as a completed package. That would then be published, and God bless you, have a nice time. But stuff for our Tuesday morning that are not prime time documents yet, that would not go out.
My feeling and my experience has been that when items, the vast majority of the time, when an item comes on a briefing agenda for a Tuesday or a Monday morning, it doesn't typically change by the following week. And I think it's important for the public to be aware of the basis for the decisions that we're making. And so I do think there's a value to sharing some of those documents as part of the briefing process, because it is a public document most of the time, and it's informing our decision making. And so I think it might help the public understand, what PowerPoints are we looking at? What documents are we looking at when we make a decision? So that's the value that I see.
Yeah, and I don't think what I said differs from that. Because if we're getting briefed on the final document as it's going
Right.
for action, that is in its final form. But if we're going to change the complexion of our meetings so that we've got the planning meeting and then we've got, the briefing before action, in that planning meeting.
Oh, you're talking about strategic planning versus briefing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to parse out separately, because we can go through several iterations through this planning, and I think it has a tendency to hamper this discussion and debate when you've got all these different drafts out there and it's a working process.
So an example would be today with Aaron's, information on the fair and the fees, because those were not final until we make a final decision. We didn't have a lot of debate on it, but we could have had more debate and said, we don't want to have the parking fees go up to $10. We want to keep them at $5.
Yeah.
Which is still in my mind, but it's,
Yeah, good example.
So it wasn't marked as draft today. Should have been marked as draft, because we have not made a decision, and she's coming forward to us to seek our input into that prior to making any changes. And then since there was no additional input, and we, it's going to go on the agenda and be, action made. But we could have had a lot more debate today on that topic and decided we don't want to raise fees, or we want to raise it higher if there was another cause for that, is that enough? So that's, today would have been an example of that. But I just want to, make sure we're not, that to publish that out there, then people are like, well, that's already the rates. As of today, that's not the rates. That was up for discussion for us to be able to adjust or change.
To me, that would be, sorry.
Well, she filled out the agenda sheet. She said, it's coming from her. The Fair and Expo Center management staff would like to seek approval to increase at this amount. And I agree, she probably should have put proposed rate increases or something at the top of the exhibit just to make it clear.
Yeah.
But and maybe at the top of the resolution language, maybe this is it needs to say draft at the top, something like that.
So,
but everything in here, the way I read, I think she did a decent job. We could make some changes to have some better language, but all that goes out to us on Friday. So it's public document at that point.
So from certainly at a policy level, this how the board wants to move forward with publishing or not publishing at the end of the day is a policy decision, and you can go either direction. From a public records standpoint, the example of the fair rates, that is not something we could withhold as a draft if a public records request came in for that. So just to clarify those two kind of areas.
I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, absolutely, no. And both,
We could
either direction is perfectly fine legally, but just to to apply the Public Records Act to that specific example, that would not be a document that the draft exemption from a public records request would apply to. Now, that doesn't mean it's a final document, but it would not qualify to be exempted from a public records request.
And so was everything today that we had in the sheet, did the public have access to it?
No, today, what the public sees is the agenda. They see this thing right here. What you all get in your package is all the supporting material behind it. So you see that.
But I mean, it's a public record as soon as it is published by the clerk. And so it's already in a form that could be shared out. So I mean, I think the proposal is to take the agenda and then have the cover sheet with any draft documents. But I hear what you're saying, Commissioner French, about the strategic planning. If we're like working on a policy or a code change and it's gonna need like several iterations, we'll have to think about, for the strategic planning meetings, it could be a 3-month process of working through an interlocal agreement with like 10, 20 different changes. So, that is important to think about how we track those.
To the public records example, I think actually this topic and the topic of changing the code for the county code on the regularly scheduled commissioners meetings, that is a good example of what would generally qualify as a draft for public records purposes. The copies that Scott circulated that had track changes in them that had showed all of this differing language, that is something that would likely qualify as a draft for public records purposes.
Oh, so even
right?
Commissioner Jordan's draft changes.
Right.
Okay.
That would be something that could likely be withheld on the Public Records Act as a draft, right? We hadn't reached a final form. It's very clear that it's being, in process, in progress, right? And if that's released, there's a potential for miscommunication with the public as far as what the code is, how it is set up, things like that. And so where you have a draft in process, that release of that draft could affect how it goes forward. Whereas keeping it held closely allows you to have kind of free discussion and everything. That is the purpose of the Public Records Act.
And that's what's come back to bite me multiple times, is that when you're working on trying to develop policy and you have an iteration and it gets out in the public, if they can take that as a final action and then scream bloody murder at you, even though it's not final, and even though it wasn't a document that you produced, but now you find yourself trying to defend an action that did not happen based upon a document that was poorly presented to the public. So my history has been that doesn't serve the public very well, because they want to know what actually is going to impact them, not coulda, woulda, shouldas. And so that's what I was trying to get to, is the evolution of that chain of thought.
Yeah, I'd be interested in the legal interpretation, because I always assumed every draft I worked on, like when I was at the city, of multiple policies, centers and corridors, design guidelines, that it would all be open to, a public disclosure. But ultimately, the final document is the one that's adopted as actual policy. But I don't know, maybe that's been a new area that's been developed with the Public Records Act.
And like any public record, it's going to be a case-by-case analysis as far as, the document itself and what state that document is in as far as being in a draft format, right? Certainly there is a point at which a document reaches where it has not been necessarily adopted or final action has not been taken, but it is in a final format, which would put it beyond a draft stage, which would make it a public record, even though it has not been necessarily voted on. So it's not that final action needs to be taken before it becomes a public record, but where it is in a kind of draft iterative process and going back and forth, it is not necessarily, and that, again, depending on the circumstances of each individual policy, code, et cetera, whatever is at issue, that's kind of gonna determine whether or not that particular document, or parts of that particular document qualify for an exemption, for that exemption.
So just a comment is you're highlighting some of the various things on today's briefing. Whatever the direction of the board is, we want to be consistent in terms of how we apply it in the system, because the system, I don't think, Gina can correct me if I'm wrong, it's either you publish all documents or you publish none. There are some of the things on here that were not actionable. The Doug's briefing, you were getting an overview of the aquatic season coming up. Wasn't there any action, nothing that would have changed. Same with the snow season recap, but the free briefing you just talked about, that could have changed. Maybe Deborah's could have went out, but you may have elected not to accept the grant from for the Doris Morrison. You may have not elected to enter in a net metering agreement. So there's a diversity of types of items on here. Again, whichever way we go, we weren't gonna be able to pick and choose which items on here, publish that, don't publish that. It's either an all or nothing. Is that right? Okay.
Personally, I just don't see anything in our briefing packet that would be harmful for the public to see. I think to the example of the proposed rate increase, I think it's important for the public to know that we're considering a certain dollar amount for parking, and to see the presentation that justifies that. I think a lot of the concern I'm hearing could probably be dealt with by people just labeling presentations, draft for proposal, presentation to commissioners, et cetera, to make it obvious to anyone reading it that it may not represent a final action. But, for the public to see some documents about a grant for children's education, I just don't see the harm in a lot of that going out. So I'm struggling to figure out what the downside is for a lot of this going out to the public.
So, and as a, since it's an all or nothing, it goes out today to the public because they have access today to this briefing, where they get to hear the conversation that goes along with those items. So I guess I still feel like we're getting it to the public, just maybe not in the same form.
In a week prior to adoption, if action is taken, so we can advance.
Because they can look on the agenda, which is why I'm trying to stay timely to the agenda as possible. So if someone does want to go, they can go and see the presentation that we're getting and all of that on YouTube, because it's up today, as soon as we're done.
But I think it helps inform that someone might actually want to zoom in and watch the meeting, because there's a particular item that they're interested in. And once they look at the materials, they go, oh, okay, I'm interested in listening in on that item, like actually during the meeting. I mean, I think the goal is just to have greater transparency of what we're doing and making sure if people do want to zoom in or come in person to our briefing meetings, they know what we're actually talking about. I'm just used to having all that material published and advanced at the city, and it just seems like if it's not too difficult to do from the clerk's perspective, from the internal computer program. I mean, it seems silly that all the work is done to create the packet and it only goes to us. I mean, we can just forward it on to anyone we want on Friday, but it would sure be nice if it was just consistently available on Fridays for the public to just see what we're up to. I mean, I don't know if today anyone would have really been interested in much of detail of what we were talking about, but if someone's passionate about the Learning Center and they want to know a little bit more about what is this grant and what it will be for, the PowerPoint gave a little bit more detail. Or they could just look at it and decide that they don't need to zoom in because they have all the information they need. So I get what you're saying. You could spend 3 hours of your time fast forwarding through a, recording, or we could just give people more information up front. Seems like if it's already easy to prepare, why not do it?
Technology is not a limiting factor.
And another reason behind my thought with this is that currently, the legislative agenda goes out Friday, right? Late or afternoon. That's when the public currently gets a lot of the supporting documentation. We then vote on Tuesday. We don't take live testimony on Tuesday for things that are on the consent agenda. So under the current practice, by the time the public sees the supporting materials, it's really effectively very late for them to be able to weigh in if they want to on anything. So I was trying to come up with a way, when it seems to be, for the most part, harmless to do so, to be more transparent up front and share those documents so people can see what we're seeing when we're talking about important decisions. So just trying to back that time frame up for the transparency piece.
And I guess, like I said, I think it's still a transition period to try to figure out what, having people make sure they're marked draft, having people make sure they're marked proposed, which, people haven't been used to. Because I know even, with Mike Sparber, with his presentations, they're draft presentations, because he's coming to us and seeking input as well, when he's talking to us about it. So it's like, so I don't want to have, it's like, that's my concern, is just having so much information out there. Not so much, but information out there that you're just seeing a piece of it and you're not hearing the context of the discussion with the commissioners. Because the public's not coming in and doing public input at this point in time when we're having our briefings. So to me, it's better to have the briefing to have the context of what the commissioners are saying with some of the information we're getting, and not all of it. A lot of it is just normal, pretty easy, stuff. But then some other parts of it are, where we want to have more discussion and with the commissioners. So I'm not opposed. I'm just trying to figure out, that's why it's this transition period, to try to figure out how best to do it and make sure that we're being respectful to the departments, respectful to ourselves, because again, it's proposed fees, not actual fees. So this just happened to be one that, today, as I think about it, making sure we're at, and like, with Mike Sparber's presentation stuff, today at GSI wanted to get a briefing. So I have some of his slides to talk about, but that's still all draft, because none of that's finalized. We haven't finalized any of that. So it's, I'm not going to be giving those out to GSI at this point.
But if anyone requested them from our public records officer, they would have to give it.
Yes, they could.
So that's just time on our public records officer to have to then send it to as much as we could put out there.
But it lets them know that it's a draft and not, this isn't the final version, because we all haven't decided as to bed counts. We all haven't decided, on that. The public is going to be the one making the decision before we do. So I don't want to have that out there as that this is the final, this is exactly what the future Law and Justice Center is going to look like. And it is out there, but again, they're seen in context, if they're watching the meetings, as the commissioners are discussing it. But those thoughts.
Yeah. Well, and you do eliminate a lot of public anxiety about what is and is not, and what will and will not. It's still a representative form of government. We're here to represent the interest of the public, and that's what we're trying to do. And if we want the public to do our work, then we don't need to be here. But we've got to be able to do that, the work of the public in an environment that allows us to evolve documents to a final situation. So I mean, you mentioned that, this is the way you used to do it in the city. It's the way that the city does it now. It's not the way the city did it when I was there. But, I don't want to become the city. I don't want to, and I don't think the voters that put me here want me to become the city and stuff. So we are different. We're a different form of government. We're a different type of government. So.
Well, I just know, I think we want to make it as easy as possible for our voters and citizens to be able to access information and not make it challenging. So the more that we can just put out there about our upcoming decisions and packets and meetings, I just think it shows that we, are open and interested in what they have to say and that they can see what we're doing. So I just think it's a good practice.
I also think it may be that people seeing more about why we're making decisions might result in less questions of decision making. And I think it also allows the county to kind of highlight all the good things happening as well. It's not just about negativity, right? It's also about all the great work on broadband and all sorts of issues that might be more available to people than it currently is if there's more of that kind of supporting material out there ahead of time.
Commissioners, would you be more comfortable if we got in a practice of having departments that were proposing things, proposing rate changes, proposing grants to be approved, proposing other agreements? We got into a practice of having draft on all those documents. It means we got to go back and work with the departments and ensure that they're putting the watermark behind it. If we got to that point of having all those things in draft stamped there, would you be more comfortable with us getting to a place of the agendas being, all the content being published at the same time the meeting agenda gets published for our future Tuesday morning meetings? Maybe it's something to think about, just a consideration.
To me, I think that's important because it's not final till we vote on it, and it is drafted until that point in time. And again, I think a lot of, in a draft, you want to make sure, I feel like I want to make sure, because we're all only one individual commissioner, that you want to hear the discussion that is happening at the commissioners' room when the staff is bringing stuff forward, because a lot of it, they're seeking input. And each item on the agenda is different, as we saw today. So that's where I think the video is a good way for them to get the information, but to actually understand the context of what the commissioners are thinking at the time. And we're not making a decision, so they still have time to provide input, because we take email input from, or phone calls from citizens all the time. So I guess, I'd be much happier with draft, because again, it's not actionable till that Tuesday when we take action on it. And we are taking input the entire time. And I just don't have a lot of people coming in and saying, oh, we didn't see any details, before you guys made a decision. So I'm not seeing that, which is why I think, if it's, whether we put it out there or not, they certainly can see that on Monday or Tuesday morning when we're meeting, and have the detail. And people are always looking at the agenda items to see what topic they may want to look at. Especially within the county, the departments do that. And I haven't had anyone be asking for all the details to support it. They'll either zoom in or look at it later. But I'm not opposed. I just want to make sure we're doing it in a manner so people, if it's out there and someone from the public gets it, they know it's a draft, that was not acted upon by us at that point in time.
Of course, I'd be fine with that. That's perfectly in line with what I was trying to achieve.
So I mean, we can certainly try that as we're kind of in this period of trying to, you know.
Yeah, it'll take, because it'll just take some time where people are consistently doing it and knowing that, Doug, you don't have to put draft watermark on yours. Aaron, you need to put draft watermark on yours. So getting them to understand when it's, my phrasing here was documents being presented or proposed for action by the board should have a draft on there so that the public knows it's a draft document that could be subject to change.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of, you know, they're seeking input.
Well, that could be in the template too. It could be a checkbox if it's a presentation only or a proposal for action, right? Because if it's just a presentation about the upcoming aquatic season, I mean, you don't have to fill out much on the cover sheet. It's pretty basic.
And we've got that requested board action, and this, some of the presentation would be no board action requested. So it'd be evident on the cover sheet, and then the supporting documents would need to have a draft or no draft on there. We can certainly begin communicating that out to the departments to have them add draft when they are bringing it to the board for a future action. So.
And then the question for me, so like in Civic Plus, because I haven't been in Civic Plus, so is the public, when they used to just be able to go and click on the agenda, then like the list that we get with everything, if we have that all properly documented as draft, or, I mean, is that what the citizens get?
That's what they would get, yes. Yep. That's it's a function that Gina does, either publish an agenda or publish an agenda with all of your materials behind it. So our practice right now is for your legislative regular session, Tuesday afternoons, when Gina publishes it on Friday, it's published with the agenda and all the documents behind. So sometimes a 300-page document in there. The nice thing is you go in Adobe and you can look at bookmarks, and you can jump right down to the one item that you want to look at on there without having to scroll through 300 pages to get to the document. So. Okay.
Wait, and Amber, I think what's different, I don't know, I haven't been at the city, but this is our working sessions, you know, our committee meetings and all of that. We don't have anything separate, you know, where it's gone through those ahead of time before it comes to the board. And I don't know if everything's published to the citizens on those.
Every committee has an agenda with attached documents, I think. I'm thinking of the Public Works Committee, pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I don't know what's changed over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I've been there for 6 years, but when I was there, when I worked with Scott as the chair of the Public Works Committee, everything that was on the agenda had attached documentation, if I remember correctly.
So, yeah.
So you're right. The committee structure is a little different, but this is basically a committee of the whole that we do everything through here, yeah.
Which is why I think it's important for the public to see the context of how we discuss it, you know, instead of just what the item is.
So I want to make sure I have clarity when I walk out of here. Am I hearing we're going to begin working with the departments to ensure they're putting drafts on here? Once we have pretty good support and consistency on that, then we start publishing the agenda package for the BOCC briefings, or are we going to start publishing on them next week with all the supporting items while we're actively working on getting the departments to have drafts on there? Is that clear in my differentiation?
Yes.
So I would think we'd give you a couple of weeks to get, I mean, we've been doing it this way, you know, 2 more weeks isn't gonna be that much of a change to get the departments a chance for you to have that discussion with them that, you know, like with Aaron, that it should be draft because it's proposed fees, you know, seeking our input, you know, those kinds of things. I think it gives you a couple of weeks to look through the agenda to say, okay, no, this needs to be draft, you know, and has a watermark and all of that.
But we can test it out. You'll see all the packets coming through. You'll see if we're getting into a more consistent path of doing that, and whether we feel good. It's like, okay, now we can push the button.
Yeah. that's what I would suggest.
And what is the deadline to get your template filled out in Civic Clerk? Like if I'm a commissioner that's putting an item on, like, I invited, I was remiss in filling out my Civic Clerk template for Rick and,
You have to leave.
mea culpa,
Sucks to be you.
for Rick and
tried to tell her.
Teresa.
Fill out
So
your
if
cover
I need to
sheet.
fill that out to get to you, so you can publish it, what is my deadline? Is that clear?
Yeah,
Wednesday at noon.
Wednesday at noon, okay, got it.
that's what our communication is to the entire county. There's a couple that straggle in occasionally, but that's what we want to keep out to the rest of the
I
departments.
think last week
Wednesday
the
noon.
challenge was the NSC ribbon cutting came up, and so we were like a day late on, and I had to call them back and say, can you come on Monday instead of Tuesday? Cause I called them Wednesday or Thursday saying, come on Tuesday, and then I had to call them back and say, no, come on Monday. So anyway, sometimes there's gonna be extenuating circumstances, so.
So I do have to be down at GSI since they want to kind of briefing. So you-
If you'd
Do we have
like, we
exec
could
session?
we do have some execs. If nothing's timely, could we do it tomorrow after?
Nothing on, I think
our
nothing
2
on,
o'clock?
nothing on the pending potential litigations can't wait till tomorrow.
And there's a couple on real estate and labor negotiations that we want to advise you on, but I think we can do those tomorrow afternoon, if that works for you. So I think tomorrow's really short agenda.
Should be, so yeah.
And we're not meeting this afternoon.
We're not meeting tomorrow morning.
So we're back to Tuesday briefing next week, the next 2 weeks.
Yes.
And then are we
We're
still
going- we're
planning
s-
for the strategic planning session the last Monday?
26th. Yep, I think it's
So-
26th.
To circle back on that, we came up with a list of potential topics last week.
I've got a couple topics I
You got
want
a
to
couple
add
more?
into that.
Okay,
Commissioner French was.
Yeah, I was out of
Oh,
town.
that's right.
Yeah, I was out of town.
so you'll get those, and then what was the next step on that?
Well, next step was prioritize. Which ones do we want to begin? Do you want to select one to have the first conversation to put on this 26th? Or do you want to use that next one? I had Rebecca, I took a notes of all your feedback from last week. She's going to update that on to the kind of revised draft, take some of Commissioner French's to put it in there, and then so you could use the 26th to identify what your priorities are, or you could
So
pick
by
one
the
of
end
the
of this
items.
week, could you send that out to all of us, and then we could talk about it next week about what we want to do on the 26th? Okay,
As another,
so by Friday,
we'll get it out the next day or so.
great.
I won't be in town next week, so, but I'll try and zoom in.
Okay.
I'll work to zoom in.
But yeah, I just thought it would be good if we have our first one, if we know what topics, we can give a week's notice to any staff about what we would need to prepare, so.
And I'm expecting that one will be more bringing in information, bringing in documents,
yes.
working sort of sessions, a lot of feedback, interaction sort of stuff. So not necessarily our agenda will just, we'll have a couple of items on there that
Yeah,
you identify
exactly.
you're gonna talk about, but that's really the extent of it.
And wouldn't also part of that activity be, a discussion about what we need to discuss? What's the material we need to be able to discuss what we want to discuss?
Yes, budgetary or otherwise, yeah.
All right, any other miscellaneous items? No? Anyone? Okay, Jessica, any media reaching out?
Yes, we did have a question about the death in the jail, but more information will come out on that this week.
Okay, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, it is 11:54 and we are adjourned. We'll be back tomorrow, 2 o'clock.